Ready? Okay.
Oh, he gave me
If you want to speak at the
that guy gave me. So, but thank you. Yeah, I'll give it back to him.
Okay, good evening. Can everyone hear me? Okay. And welcome to September 12th, 2022 City Council Roundtable. I am Mayor Ross, and tonight's roundtable is brought to you live using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. And tonight's recording will be posted on the city's YouTube channel. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Will Dana McCall please call the roll?
Councilmember Benson?
Here.
Councilmember Christensen?
Here.
Councilmember Holloway?
Here.
Councilmember Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Lassay?
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew?
Here.
Councilmember Watton?
Here.
Oh, Mayor Ross?
Here. As a reminder, members must seek recognition from the chair before speaking, and be sure to raise your hand. We now move to our first item of business, which is to approve the agenda. Council may have a motion to approve the roundtable agenda.
Move to approve the roundtable agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew and second by Councilmember Holloway to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes, and the roundtable agenda is approved. So the first agenda item is AB 22-076, financial forecast review and summary presentation of the mayor's proposed 2023-2024 budget. Finance Director Ferguson and Budget Manager Drew Boutte will present the financial forecast and the biennial budget.
All right, good evening, Council. Thank you for having me here today. First, I want to take a moment to thank all the staff that have put in a lot of work into this. In addition, the departments as well. The department directors have been heavily involved in this budget. Furthermore, I'd also want to thank the administration, the mayor, and the city administrator for their guidance and support, as well as the finance director too for all her help in producing the mayor's proposed 2023 to 2024 biennial budget. So tonight, we're going to start with a financial forecast review. This is updated since the City Council retreat back in March of this year. And then following that, we're going to provide you with a summary of the mayor's proposed 2023 through 2024 biennial budget. So just to get started with the financial forecast review, to give you a couple of key financial questions. One of the primary questions that we ask is the city of Snoqualmie financially sustainable? What we're typically asking is, will revenues keep pace with the change in expenditures annually? And if not, what kind of actions will the city of Snoqualmie need to take and when to balance revenues and expenditures? And so these are kind of the two key questions that we typically ask ourselves every time that we bring a financial forecast back to council. There are some drivers with some long-term financial impacts that have impacted the city of Snoqualmie for a while and will continue to into the future. That includes the build out of Snoqualmie Ridge, the canceled Salish Lodge expansion development. We've all experienced the pandemic recently, but that has caused certain inflationary pressures as well as supply chain issues. And then furthermore, staff vacancies. So we've had a number of staff vacancies over the past few years, which has impacted the amount that we've actually spent during those 2 years. So in terms of key assumptions, we have our kind of revenue key assumptions here. First one is we are forecasting, or an assumption that we've included is 1.25% average annual increase in property tax revenue. And this assumes that council will approve the 1% property tax increase annually, and that a small amount of infill development will take place. Property tax is our largest tax source for the general fund, which supports things like police, fire, parks maintenance, and street maintenance. So it's critical that we keep in mind what the role that property tax actually plays in local government here in the state of Washington. In addition, we've included 3.4% average annual increase in recurring sales use tax and B&O tax revenue. 2021 and 2022 were record years on the sales tax, which was sustained by higher incomes and home deliveries. And we're basing this 3.4% off of what the King County is forecasting between now and the end of their forecast period, 2031. Furthermore, we've included a 2.2% average annual increase in utility tax revenue. This assumes continued declines in the telephone and cable utility taxes, which we've experienced here in Snoqualmie over the past decade. The utility tax applied to the city's own utilities, water, sewer, and stormwater, is expected to keep pace with the overall increase in rates, 3.1%. So council approved a utility rate schedule between 2021 through 2026, where the average residential bill is expected to go up 3.1% over that time period, except for 2021. In addition to that, we've included a 4.1% average annual increase in charges for goods and services. Now, this one assumes a revenue increase resulting from what we've included in the budget, which is a proposed comprehensive fee study, as well as ground emergency medical transportation billing. Both have, like I said, have been included in the budget, and we'll kind of get into that conversation about what that impact does for our overall finances. Furthermore, we've also included a 2% average annual increase for other revenues. When we look at the expenditure side, we've included an inflation forecast pulled from the King County Economic Forecast. For 2023 and 2024, we've included 6.6 and 2.5%, particularly for supplies and services. In terms of staffing costs, some employee groups have fixed COLAs, others are shifting to inflation-based measures. And we've estimated COLAs using inflation in outer years, but for 2023 and 2024, what you see in this table is what we have incorporated as a part of our financial forecast, as well as budgeted too. So with that said, I think everyone's looking forward to a chart. And so this is that chart, right, that shows the lines crossing between 2025 and 2026. We've included the 2023 and 2024 budget that you see here, with revenue slightly under expenditures for 2023 and revenue slightly above expenditures for 2024. Eventually, the measures that we're proposing as a part of this budget pushes that kind of line out in between 2025 and 2026, and this is without ARPA funds. So we're focusing on reoccurring revenues and reoccurring expenditures, and not incorporating ARPA into that conversation necessarily, which is a one-time source of bucket for us to use. Furthermore, and just to make sure, because I think we all want to compare what you all have seen at the 2022 council retreat, I've got some faint lines for you here representing what you saw in March of 2022. The increase that you see here between, say, your forecasted expenditures and at the council retreat with the forecasted expenditures that you see here has been primarily influenced by inflation. In addition, we're also using our budgeted figures for 2023 and 2024 as opposed to what we predicted we think we were going to annually spend in those periods, and so that has an impact as well. In terms of the revenue lines that you see, the difference between the dark green and the light green represents forecasted revenues for March of 2022. The dark green includes those ongoing new sources of revenue that we're proposing as a part of this budget as well. So with that said, we also have this table, and obviously it's going to be difficult for council to really see anything, but I know council, especially the F&A committee, has been working hard on kind of developing this table, especially in regard to the financial management policies. And so just to kind of call attention to that, what we've done is we've taken out one-time expenditures as well as kind of transfers from ARPA as a part of this in order to kind of gather a sense of recurring revenues and expenditures. And you will find this table overall as part of your budget document within the appendices. All right. Now, some key concerns moving forward. The high inflation experience and very tight labor market has led the Federal Reserve to raise the target Fed funds rate significantly over the past couple months or so. Most expect the Fed to continue to undertake additional rounds of rate increases in the coming months to slow inflation. I think they're forecasting, economists are forecasting about another 1% on top of what we've already experienced. The challenge for the Fed will be to increase the rate sufficiently to bring down inflation without tipping the economy into a recession. So there's a balancing act that the Fed has to do in order to make sure, because what happens when you increase the Fed fund rates, that reduces or increases borrowing costs, which means that there's less money available in the market to chase goods. If that happens, and if there's less money available, that means generally companies will not suffer a little bit, which means they're then looking at potentially releasing staff, right? And that could tip the economy into a recession. However, most U.S. economic forecasts continue to forecast slow growth for the remainder of 2023 and into 2022 and into 2023. However, there is now an elevated risk of entering into a recession in the near future. It's not 100% predicted, but there is a possibility that that probability has been growing over time as the Fed continues to raise the interest rate. So with that said, I think council is aware that we have to deal with this kind of 1% property tax cap on our most important revenue source. And so the city will have to now, as well as into the future, figure out strategies in order to kind of rectify that difference between recurring revenues and recurring expenditures. And so often we look to this handy graphic right here that says, well, what are our levers that we can actually pull to help bring us back into balance? One of them is levels of service. So there's potential for us to maybe reduce levels of service, such as maybe finding coverage or activity reductions, maybe rationalizing assets, or engaging local partners to expand or hopefully benefit from some economies of scale. In addition, economic development is kind of one of those tools in our bucket as well. As a part of this, we would consider a tourism destination plan. Snoqualmie Hills UGA is a component of that, but also infill development too is a potential source of additional revenue that could potentially balance our revenues with expenditures. And lastly, there is always, not always, sometimes, but an option to raise taxes and fees. Council may want to eventually in the future consider property tax levy load lift, maybe utility tax increase, a square footage tax that other cities like Kent or Seattle, Tacoma might have, a public safety sales tax. And what we've proposed in this budget itself is a comprehensive fee study as a part of our overall kind of plan over the next 2-year period. So with that said, I'd like to transition into a summary of the 2023 through 2024 biennial budget. Just to give kind of a high-level summary, the city the mayor in developing this proposed budget that you see before you, and I'll just show you, all should have a document that looks like this, this binder itself. But in essence, the staff have been working to adapt to a changing financial reality caused by the public health emergency, which is the pandemic. And that financial reality has been highly impacted by the inflation that we've seen here, and so we've had to adapt to that. As the second bullet point states, we've been working to overcome the inflationary environment and the impacts of the 1% property tax cap by maximizing current and finding new ongoing sources of revenue streams. And so you'll see that as a part of the proposed budget. This budget takes a balanced budget approach to align resources with staffing needs as the community grows and increases demand for service. And so the budget that you have before you today is what we would consider from the staff and the mayor's perspective, the administration, a balanced budget is what we're proposing before you today. In addition, just to go over just some high-level numbers, the proposed biennial budget totals $163.4 million, which includes money transferred between funds internally, as well as money that is that we would spend on salaries and wages and vendors and things like that as well. It includes $43.9 million for the general fund, which supports things like police, fire, and parks maintenance. And in addition, includes $66.4 million in capital investments, which is pulled directly from the capital improvement plan that council passed on August the 8th. Lastly, the budget before you reflects council priorities, which are evident throughout the document. And just to go over what those council priorities were, council has asked staff to find ways to encourage economic vibrancy, bolster neighborhood livability, invest in our transportation and infrastructure, ensure a safe community, enhance the residents' quality of life, ensure fiscal transparency and operational stability. And the administration believes that indeed this budget document or this budget will do that. All right, just to go over the budget process a little bit, this really started at the 2022 council retreat. There was an intense focus on council priorities at that time and continuing into the next few months after that. In addition, council set the task of approving a 2023 through 2028 capital improvement plan, which included multiple reviews, also a CIP tour, and a public open house as a part of that too. Next, following the approval of the CIP, staff worked to develop a base budget. The development of this base budget, the intention of that is to fund the services that we currently offer. And as a part of that, in terms of the dollar amounts that we're willing to give the departments to allocate between all the programs that they have under them, is we increased authorized allocations that were in 2022 for supplies and services by 6.6% and 2.5% for 2023 and 2024 respectively. So in essence, those were the inflationary increases they were given above and beyond their 2022 budget in order to fund the supplies and services that they have. Furthermore, personal cost, finance staff estimated that were based on the current number of authorized positions and estimated using appropriate rate changes. There's actually a reduction in the pension employer contribution this past 2-year period, but there have also been offsets in, say, COLA increases over that time period as well. Lastly, the finance staff estimated internal service charges as well, and that was based on appropriate cost drivers. So when we're thinking about something like facilities and the maintenance of those facilities, making sure that those costs were allocated based on the square footage that each department utilizes was something that we did internally here in order to provide the departments with appropriate estimates. Following that, the departments returned their workbooks to us, basically allocating those costs between the different programs that they have. But the administration also offered the departments an opportunity to develop position requests and operational enhancement proposals. For position requests, departments can propose new positions, reclassified positions, or substitute one position for a currently vacant position. And for operational enhancements, departments were able to propose new or change programs, activities, studies, or pieces of equipment to kind of modify what they offer in terms of services to the public. In terms of the framework for those proposals, we asked the departments to consider basically whether if they have anything that they need to catch up on, if they have something that they need to keep up on, and if they have something that they want to step up to. So the questions that we would ask the departments in terms of framing their proposals included catch up, which is what does the city need to do to catch up to the level of service expectations or fix existing system deficiencies? Keep up, what does the city need to do to keep up with the growth and changing nature of the community to maintain levels of service? And step up, what does the city need to do to step up and match the vision the council and mayor have for the community, such as strategic investments that the city could make to help improve the quality of life here in Snoqualmie. Now, just to go through some of the budget document, this is a pretty lengthy budget document. It's not something necessarily that the city has prepared recently, and so I think we're excited that we're able to provide this at this time frame to council. But on page 3, you're going to find the mayor's budget message. After that, as a part of that and following the mayor's budget message, you're going to see a section on leadership overall that includes information regarding the mayor, the city council, city officials, and advisory board and commissions. We've also incorporated the mission, vision, and values of the city into this document. You'll find your council priorities and the action items and action items as part of that. We've also described the budget process. We've provided the financial forecast chart that you just saw on page 14. We've also incorporated a high-level executive summary on page 15 for you to review. And then after that, we get into the funds. Starting on page 18, you'll find a general fund overview section. And what we've done as a part of the funds as well is to provide you with an explanation of what each fund does, how much we're proposing as an appropriation for each fund, what staffing is a part of each fund, and so on. Within the general fund itself, you're going to find multiple departments, such as the administrative departments. They're all collectively together. Police, strictly for Snoqualmie, fire and emergency management, parks maintenance, community development, street maintenance, and non-departmental. So we make sure that they are appropriately segregated within this document, because that is likely something that we're going to propose as a part of the overall budget ordinance. And then we get into the other funds next after that, which includes the managerial funds, the special revenue funds, governmental capital funds, which represents the non-utilities portion of the CIP that council passed on August the 8th. The enterprise funds, which is largely made up of the utilities, water, sewer, stormwater, as well as the utilities capital fund. And then finally, internal service funds. And then after that, on page 62, you're going to find the appendices, which includes the financial forecast table, which is the basis for the chart that you've seen, a proposed budget ordinance table, an organizational chart, and then the capital improvement plan, followed by the financial management policy as soon as we have an update regarding that. And then lastly, of glossary of common budget terms. And so we believe we've provided hopefully some good detail for you, council, to review over the next couple weeks or so. And we're very happy to be able to provide you with this documentation to support the mayor's proposed 2023 through 2024 biennial budget. I just want to show this. Obviously, this is going to be difficult to read on the screen here, but in essence, it does show all the funds that we're currently proposing for this biennium. This is for illustrative purposes only right now, but what I want to say about this is that the number of funds have been dramatically reduced. We used to have probably upwards of 30, well at this stage, 30 plus funds. Even before that, we had 50 plus. And so staff really went through a process to consolidate and restate the funds. And restate the funds for prior periods as well, particularly for the budget. So it certainly has been a challenge for us overall to try to accomplish this. But I think this, once you see this fund structure, I think this will hopefully make sense. I think every fund aligns with a lot of what we do within the city and is hopefully understandable as you look into it. So next after that, I'd like to just go through a description of the positions between all the kind of departments. So within the administrative departments, we have started with roughly 19.31 FTEs, community development, 9 FTEs, fire and emergency management, 15.5, information technology, 8, parks and public works, 33 FTEs, and police, 30. In this budget document, you're going to find that the administration is proposing to increase the number of authorized FTEs from 114.81 to 119.56, which is 4.75 more. We'll get into what those positions are, but overall, that one additional FTE we're proposing to add to the administrative departments, and then 3.75 FTEs we're proposing to add to the Parks and Public Works Department. In terms of some major changes and additions, in this, if you recall, position requests or operational enhancements, in essence, we took those position requests or operational enhancements, had discussions with the mayor regarding what we should potentially do over the next biennium, and then included what we could within the budget. So in terms of expenditures with an ongoing impact beyond, and this is important, beyond the 2023-2024 biennium that we've included in as a part of this overall budget, is the police take-home program, but then also a number of positions. And those positions include the revenue manager position, a CIP project manager position, a water and stormwater maintenance technician. We've also proposed replacing the maintenance operations manager position with a stormwater and urban forestry supervisor position. And then lastly, a 0.75 FTE mechanic 2 position, which is primarily there to support our fleet division as it takes on the responsibilities of a police take-home program. Next, we've also included expenditures with a one-time impact during the 2023-2024 biennium. These include an organizational strategic plan, a parks, recreation, and open space study that will help us to assess our current parks and whether we need to make any changes towards the activities that we provide at the parks. A broadband feasibility study that would look into the ability to utilize our conduit a lot better. Parks repairs that were deferred during the pandemic. So during the last budget cycle, Parks Department was one of the, or Parks Department, well, the Parks Maintenance Division of the Parks and Public Works Department was one of the more heavily hit areas within the city during this last two-year period. And so in essence, we're requesting additional funding to help us kind of get back to where we need to be. In addition, we've incorporated a council chambers audiovisual upgrade, security infrastructure at City Hall, a core switch replacement, and a firewall replacement as well. So with that said, I also mentioned earlier that we have some proposed new ongoing sources of revenue included as a part of this proposal. This includes a B&O tax business licensing audit program, and these are activities. And we can get into what the estimate was for each one. We've also incorporated a comprehensive fee study as a part of this overall proposal, which we're hoping will generate additional revenue for the city. And lastly, we intend to apply for ground emergency medical transport support from the Healthcare Authority at the state of Washington as well over the next 2-year period, which will help to maintain a balanced budget over this next 2 year. And so that's 2-year period, and that's what we've incorporated in terms of new ongoing sources of revenue. For next steps, the administration is going to take a second bite at the apple, but we're going to work within the department's budget established in the document to see if there are additional opportunities for us to potentially stretch or at least make more efficient these departments, I think overall in terms of our allocation of staffing resources and so on. Following that, we're going to provide a update to the financial policy on the 26th, and then we're going to come back the next day with you at the 27th, and the departments are going to give a presentation on their separate budgets within this entire budget document that you have before you. On October the 10th, council's going to review and deliberate the mayor's proposed 2023-2024 biennial budget with everyone collectively. And then on the 17th and 18th, we kind of divide the funds and the departments out to the different committees for their review of their particular funds and departments. So with that said, thank you very much for your time, council. This is the start of a long process. Looking forward to kind of continuing this discussion all the way through to adoption. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Budget Manager Boutte.
Thank you.
Nice job. Councilor Benson.
So what's the answer to your question? You started this off with a question about whether or not Snoqualmie was sustainable, and then you showed a really scary graph, and it looked to me like the answer is no. That we're sliding further and further into where we're going to be behind by $1 million or so a year, which, you know, is like, I can have 3 pieces of cake today, and that's great for now, Ethan, but later on, Ethan is going to have to pay for that. And so the the lesson that I get from that is don't eat so much cake right now, right? You also the two things that you talked about, you did the Venn diagram with the levers that we can wiggle, but even more development is kind of a Band-Aid if what we're dealing with is just kind of an endemic problem of we spend more than we should, or more than we can replace with what's available to us with our limitations as far as property tax and that sort of thing. So my question is it sustainable?
So I guess maybe what I'm asking is a rhetorical question right at the beginning, because the answer is going to be continuously no, especially when we're dealing with the 1% property tax cap that we have to. I think it's been discussed before that, in essence, this law does eventually force, cities eventually into potential bankruptcy. That's, pretty much the point of that, is to have us continuously have to try to find ways to kind of mitigate this issue kind of moving forward. So what we proposed is, well, often what we're doing is we're always trying to find ways to kind of shift that curve out as much as possible. And you can certainly come up with options to cut, but you're going to have to be cutting every year, because it is unlikely you're going to ever really experience inflation, say, not often below 1%, which is the property tax cap overall. So then how are we able to achieve that? That would be an extremely hard task, for the city overall to accomplish. So we're always fighting the fact that expenditures are going to grow at a faster rate than our revenue pie can, overall. So the goal has always been to kind of push that curve out as much as possible. What we're proposing as a part of this budget is those kind of 3 items that I discussed: the B&O tax and business license audit, a comprehensive fee study, as well as the GMT billing, for example, to help push that curve out. But within a couple of years, we're gonna have to look at kind of new strategies about what to do then. Maybe as a part of this budget, council maybe want to focus on what kind of levels of service could we potentially cut, in order to bring us back into alignment, especially if we don't want to look into any sort of new sources of revenue and so on. So that's why that Venn diagram chart is out there, is we will always have to look at strategies and ways to get us to that next 2-year period and so on. But the answer is always going to be no, because the city of Snoqualmie, our primary revenue source is property tax, makes up 45% basically of our general fund sources. Until we can diversify our portfolio more, right, we're still going to be struggling, right, with this fact that we're stuck or are limited by that 1% property tax cap. So
Thank you. That was a great answer.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
Well, we're not actually limited by a 1% property tax cap. We're limited on property tax increases without going to the voters to 1%. But we're not limited to 1%. There are limitations, but we're a long way from them. It's just that the voters have to decide to do that, not this council.
yeah, a more sophisticated answer to his question would have included that, right? In addition, there's new construction values and things like that, which are dependent upon the degree of development activity that we have going on that could also extend that right out. But yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you is on page 18, there's a general fund overview, and it has some, sorry, not slide 18, page 18. If we could go back to that slide we were just on.
Yes.
So this very scary slide says that there's an inflection point between 25 and 26. But the numbers on the slide don't match what's in slide 18. And slide 18 says that we cross over at the end of this year, 2022. And then in fact, 2023 has uses of 23 million, not the 20 million that's not the 19. So I just, the numbers are very different.
One of the differences that you're seeing here is this is describing reoccurring revenues and reoccurring expenditures as opposed to the general fund table, which also includes transfers in and transfers out, which would include the ARPA funds. And so we've tried to include the asterisk here that says without ARPA funds.
Okay, fantastic. Is there a schedule that we can look at in here then that just does that reflects that, the continuing or the ongoing?
Yeah, if you go to the appendices section, really after, it's really the first one after page 62. So you'll see a 11 by 17 size sheet that has the financial forecast working draft. And so if you look at those numbers, so that should line up with the financial forecast chart that you have here.
Got it. Thank you.
And as you can see below, there's a section for one-time expenditures that were pulled out of expenditures in total so that we can have some sort of analysis of recurring expenditures. But then also the transfer section is pulled out, which includes ARPA funds and so on like that as part of that, and transfers to reserves.
Got it. So one of the things we knew and that we've talked about before with the ARPA funds is the intention, which they were intended for when they came to us, is the intention by the city to use some of that to cover the kind of impacts of the pandemic, which caused that starting point in 2023 to otherwise be in a especially scary looking, it went away, especially scary looking
That's a scary
place.
looking place.
So scary that it wants to hide. I would want to as well. But part of that is that we're actually covering that with the one-time uses of the ARPA funds, which is exactly why they were sent here, right? That's kind of one of the main things that the difference between that, the two sets of numbers that we were just talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as you know, the impact of the ARPA funds is kind of demonstrated within the ending fund balance for the general fund below. And so you can see that kind of, extends out exactly when we would drop, or reach zero and then would have to rely upon reserve funds in order to support the general fund.
Okay. Okay. Got it. And then just last question for now, so in order for more property tax revenue to come into the city above the 1%, which would require asking the voters for that, if that was to need to occur, if money was to flow in during looks like it would need to happen in the 2025 year. So for new property taxes to be flowing to the city during 2025, when would the voters have had to act to approve that increased tax?
So my answer.
And if we don't know tonight, we can find out later. We got a whole cycle here. Yeah.
City clerk eventually to take a look into that. But I believe November of 2024.
Oh, we could have money flowing in within 2 months of that. I think
So
that's
they-
wrong. Why don't we leave that question with you
Okay.
and maybe let us know
I'm
kind
trying
of
to
when you've
recall
had
from
time.
past experience, especially the public safety property tax.
Yeah, you don't need to answer it today, but I think we'll all want to know that as part of that Venn diagram and kind of understanding the levers and what the lead times are and that sort of thing. I'll just leave with the comment that that crossover point is the closest to today than I've ever seen it while on this council.
Closer than it was yesterday. Chair?
Counselor Benson?
Do we know if property taxes were our most important revenue, do we know what level the property tax that would need to be in order to keep the orange and green together?
Yeah, we can certainly conduct an assessment of that, right, to give you a sense of what that percentage increase would have to be annually in order to, bring our revenue curve in alignment with our expenditure curve that you see here.
That'd be helpful for me.
And I would say not just the percentage, but also the dollar amount that's required too, because I think that's more important to council.
Counselor Osei?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think the other thing that it's hard to see from this is for the newer council members and then those council members that have been on council for a while, the dramatic change in this diagram as it has been from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 pandemic, and then now. Because I'll get to my question because it pertains to this. But if you were to look back and see that we were forecasting much of this sort of the 2027, 2028 years were in 2017, 2018, 2019, and now we're back at a forecast that is more that way. I think what is helpful and what I feel would be helpful is without having to dive back into all of those past budget conversations, which much of them, I guess the majority of the council wasn't a part of and wouldn't have access to without diving deep into the city documents on the website, is to have some of that history. And I'm not saying everything. I'm thinking in terms of some of the diagramming of where we were on budgeting. Some of the, when I go through the budget, I see the 2022 restated or estimated years, but we do budgeting in bienniums, not single years. So it would helpful to maybe look back, and not in every, I'm not talking about every, I'm maybe thinking like the general fund and the overview page of looking back a few years to know what were we spending in 2018 and 19, and then, or let's say was followed biennium, so 2017 and 18, and then what we did in 19 and 20, and then what we ran into in 2021 coming out of the pandemic, or if we ever are out of it. The question is just kind of how that history has evolved and what we were expending and what we were seeing in revenues and how that relates to where we are now. I think some of that history would be helpful so we don't repeat it. So my question is if you could put that on your list of items to come up as we go forward.
So I think as an overall part of this document, the charts make all the difference, right, for the most part. And so when you reference the 2022 estimated and restated, that's an estimate for where we're going to end up this year. It's not actually the budget for 2022,
Right.
primarily because we've been in the past year and a half right into this kind of biennial cycle right now. We've had a number of staff vacancies. I think 30% is what we stated back in the retreat, at the retreat. And so you may see percentage increases between 2023 or between 2022 estimated in the 2023 budget that may look high. Well, that's primarily because we've had staff vacancies. And so in essence, the reason for that increase is because we're budgeting for full staffing, right, for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make that as a note as well. The chart, right, determines what the percentage will be. And so if we focus on the 22 budget and how much that increases above the 2022 budget, we can certainly go back and do that. But in terms of figuring out what our cash is going to start or what our cash looks like to begin the year, we use the 2022 estimated, where we were year-end estimate. But yes, your comment, I think, regarding history and where we've been, right, is a good
It's-
indicator of maybe where we should go and.
Yeah,
what
it's
to back
useful,
on.
it's useful
Yeah.
from a percentage standpoint, at least to understand the ups and then the back, then the down, and then where we would be back if we were on a normal upswing, whatever normal is.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
So I think if you look back to last biennium, there were similar requests for some historical info. So I think we sort of decided at the time kind of how many years to look back, and there's, I think, some templates. I would just recommend, those certainly worked for the council 2 years ago. Maybe just sort of model after that. I think whatever that historical kind of look was might be somewhere to look. But what I wanted to talk about is, could you look at slide 15 for us for a second?
Slide page.
Slide. Hopefully I got this right, because, but by the way, will we get a copy of these slides? We don't have that in our materials.
Yes, we'll send you a copy of the slides following the,
Thank you.
following tonight's roundtable. If only I can move this forward, that'd be great.
So while you're moving it, I just would point out that following the Fed's most recent meeting in Jackson Hole, actually, they have made clear they are not going to try and balance inflation fighting with recession, that they are in fact going to fight inflation regardless. Sorry, yeah, they're going to fight inflation regardless of recession. And in fact, it's now sort of flipped. Most economists now do think we're going to go into a recession because of that policy. So the Fed's just said inflation fighting is the most important thing, even at the cost of inflation, or at the cost of a recession. And for what it's worth, there are many, not most, many, who actually believe we're already in a recession. And we don't have the measurements yet to know that. So the question now that certainly most folks in the business community that I interact with are worried about, the discussion is how deep is the recession going to be, not whether there'll be a recession. So whatever that's worth, I guess in terms of some of these numbers, it's, I suppose that's helpful that we might get to some of those inflation targets that are in here, because inflation is pretty scary right now. But were you able to find slide 15
Apparently I'm
for us?
losing
Connection?
action.
That's not good.
So I'm going to share my screen again and we'll see if this, so this is slide 15. Is this the one that you were looking for? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think so. Could you just go one to the left or one to the right?
All right. It's not responding. Okay.
Oh, no, I think it was that one. Let's go ahead to 50. So, and the second bullet, or the second little bullet, it says 6.6% and 2.5% inflationary increases. So it says there's a 2.5% inflationary increase for 2024.
Right, on top of the 6.6% for 2023.
Right. But now, so 2024, 2.5%. But if you go back to slide 7,
Well, I don't know. Apparently that's not, shows up here on my screen. I was like, oh, here's the
We need that AV up.
chart.
Let's get, oh, there we go.
I'm not sure.
almost.
So apparently I'm the one that's screen sharing and I certainly have it.
Okay, so I guess it.
That's
can
why
you
we're
go-
proposing council chambers AV upgrade now.
Sorry, I'm trying to grab the numbers on these slides. They were moving it. Could you just go to 8?
If it moves.
In a minute.
The table?
There's a table that had some orangey percentages down on the right side.
Ah, okay. This one. As soon as it gets there.
This one. Thank you. Orangey on the bottom right says that in 2024, staffing costs, which is our biggest cost, is not going to be 2.4%, but 3.5% was a pretty massive difference. So I guess the
So with the previous slide, that-
2.5 at the top. So I'm just trying to sort of understand how we built this budget, and you can see what I'm sort of getting at as a concern that, well, if we think inflation's 3.5 for our biggest cost drivers, then how would we budget at 2.4? I'm just trying to understand that.
so in terms of the slide that you, we'll see if we can find it now.
Oh, sure, now it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yes. Where did I state that? I think within here.
It was at 15.
So in essence, yeah, 15. So we stated 6.6 and 2.5% for supplies and services, so not including
supplies
personnel
and
costs. Right, and so we estimated personnel costs were based on the current number of authorized positions and estimated using appropriate rate changes. And so the basis for what you see in terms of those COLA increases, really, we're working off the agreements that we have. We have one agreement so far, right, in place through 2024, and I believe that's the police SPA agreement. And so in essence, what we've done is made an assumption that other bargaining units, right, would potentially request something similar moving forward. And so consequently, we've included 3.5% as well for 2024 across all the different employee groups that you have here.
So that's one of the sort of core things you're trying to get us to realize, right? Which is, you know, this upward pressure on costs that far outstrips our ability to generate revenues, right?
Correct,
Without
yes.
going to the voters.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
Which would only remedy the problem for a while, and then we would have to come back to the voters, right? So it's not a long, permanent solution that would bring our revenue curve in alignment with our expenditures. We will have to continuously, right, come back to the voters if that's the case.
So we think services, despite the fact that most of those services have employees, are going to go up at a rate well below what our own employees will go up at? Because you
Well-
said sorry, I can't remember all these numbers in my head.
Yeah,
But it
so
seems like it wasn't up at
2.5% for
3.5.
supplies and services, but we've included an inflator for COLAs, right, of 3.5% across all employee groups. So in essence, I mean, you can even look at 2023, right, and see the difference between what we've inflated for supplies and services in 2023 and what the bargaining units, and there is, I believe, a couple agreements approved for 2023 itself, which are below what we're estimating in terms of inflation, right, overall. And so in essence, those bargaining units may want to play catch up a little bit, but the starting point for all of this has been that one bargaining unit that does have an approved 3.5% for 2024.
Okay, that makes sense. So then I'll just leave this for now with, I think the council, certainly I will want a lot of analysis of sort of our exposure, if you will, to inflation, right? We're making, this is, I think these inflation assumptions produce wildly different budgets. And so sort of some what if, you know, like, you know, really do we really think that the unions won't be, you know, they'll take a 2023 6.6% inflation hit and not come back and ask for something back. So just, you know, can we sort of look at some of the sensitivity to different cost categories and different sources,
Yeah.
you know, to different inflation, kind of give us a sense of, help us sort of assess how much inflation risk sort of is in there, risk that we sort of end up somewhere other than where we built the budget around, so that we can sort of get a sensitivity to it.
So in the background, we've been working on a financial model that would hopefully enable us to do that, right? Sort of sensitivity analysis that you're asking. We understand that inflation is, you know, one of those primary drivers, and if whatever you're to experience 10% inflation, if the Fed's not able to bring it down, right? Or what's the consequence of a potential recession, and trying to kind of build some of those scenarios so that you, council, can see the impact, right, that some of those cost drivers may have, right, overall. So that is, yeah, our goal.
Thank you.
Just wasn't prepared in time for tonight, so.
Got a few weeks. Thank you.
So council, we have about 10 minutes before we start council. Do you want to adjourn now, or do you have any further questions?
When's that? Oh.
Councilor Watton?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Boutte, so what you're sharing with us is information that is based on the economic forecast of King County as well as the state. And so at some point, if those numbers are different, even though we're passing a biennium budget, we could come back and revisit this. Is that correct? Midterm of
Yeah.
this?
Yes, in essence, we would review, right, these key assumptions that we've put into the budget and then try to figure out what we need to do or strategies that we need to come up with in order to, say, rebalance the budget for the next year. If that is indeed the case, something that we have to do.
So it's not like set in stone. It gives us a roadmap, a reasonable expectation, and then there may be unreasonable outcomes that we
Right.
have very little control over.
I think there's likely unforeseen events or opportunities that may come forward for the city over the next 2-year period that we just can't foresee right now that, eventually will impact the budget. So,
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lacey, did you have?
I was just going to ask, when's our next, is our next opportunity to discuss this at a roundtable on the 27th? Is that the date that I saw?
whoops, back again. So,
26th,
Uh,
okay.
So on the 26th, we're going to bring the update to the financial policy to council to discuss those financial policies, and they have a direct influence on the budget we're providing here to you today, and will impact us as we continue to provide budget materials to you kind of moving into the future as well. We're going to give the departments, or we're hoping to give the departments an opportunity to kind of present their budgets to council on the 27th, which is a special meeting. I believe that's a Tuesday. On October the 10th, that's really the next opportunity for council to, I would say, review and actually deliberate the biennial budget that the mayor has proposed here. And then next, we'll start getting into that committee structure and breaking down those funds and the departments amongst the different committees and having those discussions more in depth with council. So that is the proposed game plan, and there's more dates after that as well. A second kind of committee review session as well. But yes, thank you.
So thank you, Budget Manager Drew Boutte and Jana Walker and Finance Director Jen Ferguson on the biennial budget documents. Just very thorough, detailed, and very impressive. So nice job. And council, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move?
So motion by Councilor Watton, second by Councilor Holloway to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, we are adjourned until 7 p.m. Right. Tonight we do have a public hearing, so if anyone wants to speak, be sure that you have signed in. The sign-up sheet is over there on the table. And those that are online, we will ask for your names and your city in just a couple minutes.
Fighting fires,
Right.
voting shares.
Okay, so this is we just finished a roundtable, and now this is a regular meeting. The time is now 7:01. Let the record show that all council members are present, and please stand and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Benson, would you please lead the pledge? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we now move to our first item of regular business is to approve the agenda. Motion, Council may I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
Moved by Councilor Holloway, second by Councilor Watton. Any discussion?
Could we see the agenda on the screen, Mayor? Did we not decide to pull some of these?
We're gonna wait till 10 o'clock and then.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Any comments?
Could we just kind of scroll
Can you just scroll up further, please? A little bit further. Right there?
Could just go, Mayor, move to postpone Agenda Bill 22-100, Agenda Bill 22-099, and the Community Development Committee Affordable Housing Committee discussion to the next council meeting.
Second.
So it's moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew, second by Councilmember Christensen to move AB 22-100, AB 22-099, and Affordable Housing Committee discussion to the next council meeting. I would state the next council meeting is very full. October 10th might be better. But Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
Amend my motion to move those items to the October 10th council committee meeting.
All right, it has been amended to move it to the first meeting of October, October 10th.
Second.
It's been seconded by Councilmember Johnson. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, motion passes. So this first item on the agenda is AB 22-114, which is the public hearing.
Point of order. I think
Yes.
we just voted on the amendment to the motion.
So the little dinosaur?
Yeah.
All right, okay. All those in favor for the full motion, moving the three items to the October 10th. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Order, Mayor. I believe at this stage, it's motion to approve the agenda as amended. Is that correct?
Yeah.
We agreed to
Right.
postpone, voted on that. Now we're back to the main one of the agenda overall.
Correct. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Okay, motion passes. And the agenda is approved as stated. Okay, first item on agenda is AB 22-114, public hearing for Snoqualmie Mill Site Agreement. Before the public hearing, City of Sturbank will address the legal parameters pertaining to quasi-judicial land use matters, including the appearance of fairness doctrine. City Attorney Sturbank.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, members of the council, members of the audience. As has been our practice for quasi-judicial land use matters at the start, when the matter is called, I'll ask the council a series of questions related to potential relationships, if any, between council members and the applicant and potential opponents of the project, as well as questions about ex parte communications. Because the council has met on this topic very recently, as recently as last Thursday, I'll just ask a general umbrella question about whether there's been any changes in relationships since last meeting to now, as well as whether any communications have been received since last Thursday to now. So the first question is whether or not there have been any changes in your relationship. Do you have any financial or ownership interest in the mill site property, the applicant, any membership or relationships with opponents of the project, including Snoqualmie Community Action Network? And has there been any change in any of those since the last meeting? Councilmember Benson.
No.
Councilmember Watton.
No.
Councilmember Holloway.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
No change.
Councilmember Lissay.
No change.
Councilmember Christensen.
No.
Councilmember Johnson.
No.
All right, thank you. And do you believe that you stand to gain or lose directly as a result of approval or disapproval of the project, or in this case, the development agreement? Councilmember Benson.
No.
Councilmember Watton.
No.
Councilmember Holloway.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
No.
Councilmember Lissay.
No.
Councilmember Christensen.
No.
Councilmember Johnson.
No.
Is there any reason that you believe you cannot judge the matter impartially? Councilmember Benson.
No.
Councilmember Watton.
No.
Councilmember Holloway.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
No.
Councilmember Lissay.
No.
Councilmember Christensen.
No.
And Councilmember Johnson.
No.
And last, have you had any ex parte contacts or received any ex parte communications with proponents or opponents concerning the proposed action? Councilmember Benson.
None.
Councilmember Watton.
No.
Councilmember Holloway.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
No.
Councilmember Lassay.
No.
Councilmember Christensen.
In speaking with a friend, I said that there would be a public hearing, but there was no discussion whatsoever beyond the fact that there was going to be a public hearing on the mill site.
All right, thank you for that disclosure. Councilmember Johnson.
No.
All right, thank you, Mayor. That concludes my polling of council members. I'll turn it back to you and staff.
All right, thank you. I'd like to get the names of those that are online that would like to participate in the public hearing. If you could please state your name and your city. Raise your hand. I see Ian Gray. Let's see. So Ian,
Hi, yes, Ian Gray. I live in the Meadowbrook community, resident and property owner.
great, thank you. Next we have Lauren Silver.
Hi, yes, I'm Lauren Silver. I'm the Executive Director of the Snoqualmie Valley Preservation Alliance, and I'm here representing the Snoqualmie Valley.
Great, thank you. Keith Goldsmith and Trish Clements. Great.
Keith Goldsmith, Bellevue, Washington, with Goldsmith Engineering. I'll only be participating if necessary to answer questions on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Richard Weinman. Richard Weinman, do you intend to speak for the public hearing? If so, introduce yourself with your the city you live in, please.
Sorry, I was muted. Richard Weinman on Mercer Island. I'm here to answer questions relating to the project EIS.
Great, thank you. All right, so, hey, everyone can lower your hands. We will call on you in a little bit. Okay, so I will now open the public hearing. And in this proceeding, the community is invited to provide comments about the draft development agreement, sometimes referred to as the DA, for the proposed Snoqualmie Mill Site Plan Commercial Industrial Plan. A draft DA was publicly available on September 6, 2022, and was presented to the council members during a special city council meeting on September 8th. The council requested revision of a portion of the draft DA's affordable housing section, but otherwise determined that the council deliberations on the draft DA would await input received during the September 12th public hearing. Written public comments were accepted until the beginning of this public hearing. As allowed by council rules of procedure, at the September 8th special city council meeting, the city council adjusted the time limits for the speakers at September 12th public hearing to reflect the level of public interest in and the complexity of the proposed mill site development. So the adjusted times, limits, and procedures for the Snoqualmie Mill Site Development Agreement public hearing are as follows. We will start with staff introductory presentation. Then we'll have an applicant presentation for 20 minutes, and then an opposition presentation for 20 minutes. And the individual members of the public will have 3 minutes. They will have staff comments, and then applicant rebuttal time equal to 1.5 minutes times the number of opposition public comment speakers. And then also, we will also include the number of written comments as well. Please be advised, speakers may only speak once. Those wishing to speak during the public hearing must sign up, and speakers will be called on in order according to the sign-up sheet. For online attendees, we have received all their names, and we will alternate the speakers by calling one person for the in-person sign-up and then one person for those signing up online. So please note that the subject of the public hearing is a proposed development agreement. The project's environmental impact statement was a subject for a prior appeal hearing, after which the EIS was determined to be legally adequate. The council is not reviewing the adequacy of the EIS. It will not receive additional public comments on the topic, as record related to the EIS is already closed. Similarly, the council will not be hearing public comments on the planned commercial industrial plan decision, or related code deviations, or the PCI plan conditions. The record on these topics was also subject to the hearing examiner proceeding, and that record is also closed. So when you get up, we'll ask you to please state your name and city of residence of record. You'll direct your comments to the council as a whole and not individual members. And please note that it is not a time to ask questions of the council, the mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will quietly and respectfully listen to your comments. So with those limitations in mind, I will now turn to staff to provide the staff introduction. Mr. Rogers or Mr. Sturbank?
Good evening, Council. Jason Rogers, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department here at the city. Tonight, you will be hearing public testimony about the proposed development agreement. This development agreement was introduced to the Council last week at a special meeting on Thursday, and the Council and the City Attorney and staff went through the entirety of the draft development agreement with you at that time and all of its component provisions. This development agreement was developed based on the record that was developed for the planned commercial industrial plan and is also based on the environmental impact statement, as you heard the mayor discuss with regard to the record. As I said, tonight you'll hear testimony from the public to help inform the council's continued deliberations and ultimately decision on this development agreement. And there's a special meeting scheduled tomorrow evening from 6 to 9 p.m. for the city council to continue its deliberations with regard to both the development agreement and the PCI plan itself. And so we can, certainly the council, of course, could have further discussion or deliberations tonight at your option, but we have a large chunk of time set aside tomorrow for you to hopefully digest this and then come back and have a good discussion tomorrow night. That's all I have for that, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next will be the applicant. You will have 20 minutes to speak. And when you have when 1 minute left, you will see a yellow flashing light.
Good
So
evening.
Hold on before you start.
Oh.
1 second. Okay. So please state your name and city.
My name is Tom Schroff. I'm in 13471 456 Place Southeast North Bend. Been a resident of the Valley since 2003. My partner, Mac McGinnis, and I represent Snoqualmie Mill Ventures. We're advisors to the company, which is owned by the Rimmer family. We're going to talk about the development agreement a little bit, but first I want you to meet Steve Rimmer and let him introduce his family.
Thanks, Tom. Steve Rimmer from Sammamish, Washington. Thank you for the opportunity of standing up here tonight and introducing ourselves to everybody. Appreciate your time that you've already spent on this project and obviously will spend on it. Some of you will know me and my family, but I'm sure many of you don't. Tonight is another opportunity to put the faces to the entity that's known as Snoqualmie Mill Ventures. These proceedings are the culmination of a process to obtain approval to develop Snoqualmie Mill site, a site that we've owned since we purchased it from Weyerhaeuser in June 2010. The we can be defined as my wife, Leslie Decker, myself, and our 2 children, Josie, who's here with us tonight, and James, who's joining virtually. Leslie grew up in Issaquah, and ever since I met her, she has talked with affection about her experience in this part of the Pacific Northwest. We took a conscious decision in 2001 to move to Sammamish because of what this area offers, and because we wanted our children to grow up here. They were 2 and 4 when we moved here. This area is what we call home. It's somewhere we value and see ourselves being primarily based here for the long term. It's with this perspective that we approached the proposed development of the mill site. This site is special. The site has provided resource and value to the Snoqualmie Valley and its residents, and we want to continue that. The physical site is a major regional legacy, but it is nothing without the community which it supports and provides for. That is a focus for us. We've always been involved in supporting local causes, including Compass and Seattle Children's, which is very close to our hearts. We intend to explore opportunities within the proposed development to provide amenities that will support the Snoqualmie community. Whilst we see the opportunity to provide some value back to the community through this development, we also recognize that it needs to be sustainable, both economically and environmentally. The development will ensure any cleanup that is deemed necessary will be addressed. The economic benefit to the community has been calculated and presented as part of the development process, and we believe this will be meaningfully significant to the city. Our aim is also to ensure, wherever possible, the development is environmentally sustainable. The Pacific Northwest has been on the cutting edge of environmental construction innovation, and projects such as the Bullitt Center in Seattle will provide inspiration for the mill site and its development. The mill site's been a significant part of the Snoqualmie Valley for well over a century. Our stewardship of that site has been relatively short in 12 years, but it's been a busy 12 years. The review process has been extensive and thorough, and we look forward to continuing with the determinations of the regulators, and we look forward to continuing as we have done to date, respecting the process and complying with the determination of the regulators and the experts as we move forward to deliver something that respects history and will produce benefit for all involved for the next century. And with that, I'll close my remarks. And again, once again, thank you for your time and your considerations.
Okay. Jason and I are going to coordinate this, right? It's going to be just fine. I'm not nervous at all. Thanks again for letting us talk to you directly. This is a very short presentation I want to get done inside of the remaining time, which is right now about 14 minutes, to answer any questions you might have. Tonight we're going to hear from SCAN, we're going to hear from the general public, and we've also received some written comments from others, including the Snoqualmie tribe. I'm not going to address those here. Those will be addressed later in the rebuttal period or in writing afterwards. Tonight we're just going to talk about the development agreement. Staff has done a really good job of presenting the information that's in the PCI plan and the EIS, and we have nothing to add but perspective. Snoqualmie Mill is a large, complicated site that we felt deserved at the very beginning and a thorough environmental investigation before any land use decisions could reasonably be made. And after years of analysis and documentation, that process is completed. Having the hearing examiner reviewed and confirmed the findings of the EIS, the record in front of you fully analyzes this project and concludes that it can be adopted with specific mitigation measures and conditions without adverse environmental impact to the community. The SEPA record has been reviewed, it has been challenged, and it is now closed. We're talking tonight only about the development agreement, and I hope all of the people you hear from tonight understand that and respect that. The development agreement is the binding contract between the city and the applicant, governing how this project will be developed over 20 years. It provides the city the assurance that the project will not become a burden and will in fact benefit the community. See how that works? I turn the page. You're so far back there. But let's step back a little bit. We began design and program process by understanding the history and the context of the site. It's pretty incredible. As many of you know, it opened in November 1917 and was the employment center of the Upper Valley for nearly 100 years. It was the only major employer in the valley. It was also a true company town where people lived and shopped. It had the largest YMCA in King County for a long period of time. It had a hospital because it was dangerous work. We are proud stewards of this legacy. It is a very cool site and deserves a better future than its current state. That's really good. Our goal is to repurpose the property and to regain its role in the community as a place where people will go to work for the next 100 years. The proposal could accommodate up to 3,400 jobs at full build-out. It will expand the city's affordable housing base, and it will add authentic, creative retail experiences. Turn the page. Here we go. We're going to make a few more of these. Mill Street is the core of the first phase of the PCI plan. It is the heart of destination retail in this plan. It's a lot of fun. It's a really great idea. And planned uses are dominated by proximity to Snoqualmie Falls, the recreational patterns throughout the valley, and the community. It is oriented to views of Mount Si in the background and the Planer Building you can see on the horizon at the end of Mill Street. Target users and tenants on Mill Street will focus on wineries, distilleries, and breweries, and complement tasting rooms and restaurants. Business making other products like a glass studio, or Corcoran bindings made here in North Bend now, would be complement the character of this district. We will limit professional office space to no more than 10% of the Mill Street frontage, as the council has discussed. This project will contribute many community benefits. In addition to avoiding any adverse impacts, it will contribute many benefits. But here are the top 5. Economic impact, fiscal analysis. The PCI plan will contribute $2 million in the initial years and growing to about $5 million at full build out, as you can see on this graph. In your prior conversation this evening, you talked about how that will evolve, but there's a lot of benefit here financially. The net present value of that over a 20-year period, net of costs, this is only revenues, but net of costs is about $32 million. But we would suggest that approval of this project is the preferred alternative to reducing services or raising taxes. Environmental cleanup is a hot subject, and hotter than it should be, we think. No, I think I skipped one. Yeah, I did. The record shows that the site is not a Superfund site. It is just not contaminated enough to qualify for federal funding, but it is a brownfield site. As such, the property can and will be cleaned up and returned to productive use, just like thousands of other industrial properties around the nation. It's really commonly done. There is no public funding for brownfield remediations. In every case, private development funds cleanup. But let's talk about how that will be done. Planning Area 1, which is the area where Mill Street is, was never part of mill operations. And it is not expected to contain any legacy contaminations like planning areas 2 and 3. And we'll proceed on that by preparing a environmental media management plan, submitting that to the ecology in the city, and the construction of the site will be monitored, and if events are occurred, those will be remediated immediately before anything is done. It's very standard practice. Planning area 2 and 3 are different because we know there are legacy contamination areas. And ecology is aware of the site and will make the cleanup legacy a priority. We're happy about that. We are prepared to make the commitment to committed resources to process that through. Until that time, the site will remain undisturbed and safely contained. Clearly, the most common and preferred path toward a cleaner and safer environment is through the development process. Affordable housing. You know, we've seen throughout the valley too many 4-bedroom single-family homes be built. That's all we've got. We got a single-dimension housing stock, and that's created a lot of problems. And we need to provide housing for teachers, for medical staff, for retail workers, and for our children who can't afford to live here. The PCI plan proposes to mitigate this problem by delivering 160 workforce housing units. Our focus is the needs of employees who work here. Those would underwrite and qualify if they make more than $20 an hour, which is not that hard today, which is not a high standard today. New hires at QFC are currently offering $21.15. The development goes further than that and requires a portion of the rents will be restricted to affordable housing households earning 80% of the King County adjusted median income, and that restriction will stay in place for 50 years. We all want a broader mix in our housing stock. We urge the council to accept our proposal. The record shows that the proposed proposal nearly doubles the required open space to 64%, about 166 acres. That's 75 acres more than required. You all had a discussion about whether that was, how that was allocated and where those uses would be. There's more than enough surplus open space. Much of that open space will be permanently protected as wetland and associated buffers. It will be primarily used for passive recreational purposes, meaning trails. The internal trail system will be connected to the Riverwalk on the west that the city is planning and started, and the Snoqualmie Valley Trail System on the east. We sold the uplands part of this property in 2015 to King County to accommodate that trail system. And there is one missing link, and we think that'll get solved too. The goal here is for this site to become the trailhead for King County, offering access to many parts of the balance of the state. It's not a small thing. This is a big center. And also, we don't plan any open space to be developed for public parks. That's not what we've done here. This is not a burden on the city for maintenance, but it's also not active recreational space. Finally, infrastructure. The main thing the development agreement does is set the method and the requirement, the contractual obligation to provide the project to provide infrastructure ahead of development. So that means there's a process in place. It'll be measured, whether it's a project that we build entirely on our own or we make a substantial contribution to. It has to be proven that it can be done, and B, that it will be built before we can start construction on anything. So that's the primary source of no adverse economic environmental impact. That's really what I wanted to say to you tonight. But I'd also like to hear your questions and concerns. There is 2 minutes and 34 seconds left.
Councilor Benson?
You mentioned that a percentage of the housing would be affordable housing. Is there a percentage that you are suggesting?
We have proposed 15%, which is, housing is tough to get in a lot of communities. And that is a point at which those things can be built and will be built. If we go beyond that, I'm not sure. It gets a challenge.
And what percentage of the jobs that are going to be created? There's a lot of jobs being created.
Wait, point of order. Go ahead, Matt.
State your point.
This is a public hearing, not a conversation and discussion process. I believe we are stepping out of bounds from the requirements of this public hearing.
Agenda, City Attorney.
That's the typical practice, which is not to ask questions. It is the council's public hearing. So the council could decide how to proceed, especially when you have a single presentation from.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to withdraw my question.
I would leave it to the council.
Councilor, how do you want to proceed? Any questions or just? Okay.
Points of clarification?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. We hope that based on the record and the presentation today, that each of you can endorse and approve the development agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strofe. So who will be speaking in the opposition? So do you have a representative who will be speaking for the 20 minutes or?
I'm not speaking opposition. It has been requested by a representative of SCAN. I'm going to read this email verbatim here. Dear Mr. Rogers, so apologies, this email was sent to myself and several other city staff members this afternoon at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. So, dear Mr. Rogers, Snoqualmie Community Action Network is unable to make a presentation at the September 12th public hearing. We first heard that such a presentation would be allowed when some of our members viewed the September 8th City Council meeting. The city did not notify us that we would have this opportunity. If some of our members hadn't viewed the September 8th meeting, we would not have known about this opportunity at all. 4 days was not nearly enough time for our organization to collaborate on a presentation. 2 of our officers are traveling out of state, and other volunteers were already busy with other commitments. We assume that the applicant has been aware for a long time that they would have an opportunity to make a presentation. We can prepare a presentation if we are allowed a few weeks to prepare. Please notify us if we will have this opportunity. And it is signed Lacey Linney, the president of SCAN, September 12th, 2022.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, go ahead.
Would you like me to comment, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Briefly in response, the opportunity for an applicant and the primary opposition to make a presentation is stated in the council rules. The council discussed its rules and actually expanded the time available, but the fact that the opponents can make a presentation as part of a public hearing has been in the rules for a long time. As well, the public hearing notice of the public hearing was published in the Seattle Times a few weeks ago, and copies of that public notice were mailed to all of the parties of record, including SCAN. Additionally, the city has received written comments from a primary member of SCAN, Mr. Richard Shield, who I would note for the record is in the audience this evening. Mr. Shield did provide written comments on other materials in the record below previously and had corresponded with city staff about the public hearing a number of times via email in the last several weeks.
Okay, we will move on to individual members. Do we have the sign-up list? Both of them? Okay.
Ian Gray and Lauren Silver.
All right.
Hop over to.
Okay, so first up would be Richard Schill. Please, you have 3 minutes to speak. When you have 30 seconds left, you will see a yellow flashing light. So if you can finish up your comments at that point. So please introduce yourself and your city, please.
Richard Shield, live in Snoqualmie, and I would like to clarify I have no special role at STAN. I'm simply a volunteer. I have no, not an officer, board member, anything like that. So not a spokesperson for STAN specifically. I would also like to point out that for the direction of how we're supposed to be doing things, addressing only the development agreement, not the PCI plan, the EIS, things like that. But yet the proponent spent probably 3/4 of the time discussing all the non-development agreement stuff, for whatever that's worth. So, let's see. So I have several items. Because there's only 3 minutes, I would encourage you to read the written version that I submitted to Jason Rogers. Just like with other public hearings, often the vast majority of the material needs to be in writing because of so little time. Just to let you know the primary topics. One is having to do with Mayor Ross's presence and participation. One having to do with just encouraging the council to remember you're representing the residents and you should be advocating for the residents. And also keeping in mind that this is a huge complex project, has been mentioned, and encouraging just the highly laborious due diligence that's needed. Talking about the risk of whether the toxic remediation would actually happen and how the development agreement can involve that. Also, how the development agreement needs to pay attention to the developer paying their fair share of the true cost, not just the initial cost of things. And then I also have some comments about the low-income housing. And since I'm down to 1 minute, I'll try to address just a few of these. The first having to do with Mayor Ross's presence and participation. And there's a lot more detail on this in the written material. I encourage you to follow the links in there. So back in the 2021 council retreat.
Please be advised that this needs to be related to the
This
development
is related.
agreement.
This is related. Please listen. Mayor Ross, at the time, Council Member Ross, made specific comments advocating for this. I encourage you to go to the link in the city's website where the recording is. And at the time, the city attorney pointed out that city council members need to be fair and not advocate either way. And what was missing there was that not that she was doing any ex parte communication or anything, it was on the public record. However, she did indicate bias, and the MRSC points out that there have been a number of court cases. May I finish the one sentence?
One sentence.
Okay. There have been a number of court cases mentioned in MRSC document where decisions have been overturned when someone was not someone voting on something like this, but rather if they have a position of authority or if they in any way have an undue influence. I encourage you to read the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person will be Ian Gray, who is online.
Good evening, council. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and we will let you know, we'll give you a warning at 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, council. Ian Gray, I'm a resident and property owner in the Meadowbrook neighborhood. I live on Walnut Street, right next to the river, right next to the Meadoway Bridge. So this is intimately familiar with me. It's super important. I do have considerable misgivings about the scope and mass of the proposed mill project. It's an impactful proposal. I mean, I understand the need for development and how it can rejuvenate things, but the size of this definitely has me concerned. The fact that the EIP has been accepted notwithstanding, I think you really do need to, I urge you to think through very carefully how impactful the process of mitigation is going to be. I mean, the applicant himself spoke to the fact that this is a legacy site. I mean, we're talking 100 years of legacy cleanup. You shouldn't take that lightly. One of the biggest problems here is the movement of material. And you've got some very quiet, peaceful neighborhoods in the Meadowbrook neighborhood, 2 schools. It's very peaceful and quiet, like I say. There are going to be rippling effects in the transportation of all that material for construction as you move out, whether it's the Tocol Roundabout, whether it's the Meadowbrook Way Bridge, whether it's the intersection of Meadowbrook Way and Railroad Ave. You need to make sure that you hold them to their word in terms of what they do for the infrastructure. Now, I saw that infrastructure was number 5 on their list. It should be at the top of the list, because that is going to be the biggest problem. I'm not even sure I want to be here when that volume of traffic starts moving around. It's going to completely change the character of the river area and the neighborhood. And I have huge fears for the knock-on effect and degradation that might follow from, contaminated waterways when you start disturbing all that material on the mill site. So I just urge you to think this through very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Next person, Kelly Coughlin. Then we'll give you a 30-minute or 30-second warning.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Kelly Coughlin. I am the CEO for the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I live in North Bend. And I wanted to thank you guys for letting me come up and speak tonight. Just wanted to kind of stand up here, and majority of the business owners that are in Snoqualmie, they very much want the mill site to go further. There are close to, and I think you guys have heard me this before, there are 8.7 million visitors that come to Snoqualmie every single year. We just did North Bend's, and it was 9.2 million that came. So I think my number might be off of just a tad bit. But the problem with it is we already have the people here. Less than 1% go to a second location, which is a huge problem for us, because that means we're losing out on quite a bit of B&O taxes and different taxes and stuff like that. So I encourage you tonight just to know that our small businesses need this, our large businesses need this. This site is absolutely a better alternative than reducing revenues for the city and city services. So I applaud that. Listening, that's why I was here earlier today. I wanted to hear that little bit of our information. I happen to have been in quite a few of these brown cleanups in the past, and I know the economic vitality that happens after it, and it is pretty remarkable. One of the biggest ones that I witnessed was the Clinton Foundation, how they redid that brownfield. It was absolutely incredibly toxic, and this isn't even close to that one. So this will be an amazing thing for, I think, our community. I have quite a few of our large businesses that are up on the ridge who are desperate for expansion. And these are some pretty large companies, and the majority of their people make up between $120,000 and $140,000 a year. They will be moving out of the area unless we can provide them some place to expand to. And so the only option right now is the mill site. And I also want to just tell you, Dirtfish and the Rimmer family has been an amazing, they've helped so many nonprofits in our community, and they help a lot of the businesses as well. And I just want you to know that anybody doing this, I totally recommend that these guys are the ones that carry this through. So that's it.
Thank you. Next person will be Lauren Silver of Snoqualmie Valley.
Hi, thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm actually just here to listen and learn about this project or this agreement, but thank you for the opportunity. I have no comments at this time.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. I don't think there's anyone else in line. Okay. All right. Okay, next person, Peggy Shepard.
Hi, I'm Peggy Shepard from Snoqualmie. Appearance of fairness doctrine, conflicts of interest. Historically, the city had asked Mayor Fletcher during quasi-judicial public hearings if he had any ex parte communications with anyone that was a proponent or opponent. Mayor Fletcher chaired the public hearing for the Salish expansion developer agreements. When Mayor Larson presided over quasi-judicial sessions, he was not asked the same appearance of fairness questions, and we now know that Mayor Larson, shortly after chairing quasi-judicial meetings, became a trustee for a university owned by the Snoqualmie Parkway Hotel and more. Mayor Ross stated, as Councilmember Ross, that she wanted the council to be on record that they are for the Snoqualmie mill site development. In the same meeting, the city attorney warned the council not to speak in a public meeting of their being for or against the mill site development. One council member suggested that Councilman Ross should be allowed to clarify she intended with her statement, such as limiting her intent to including the mill site as protected income. Potential income. City staff addressed the council during the same meeting of needing guidance on whether to assume revenue from the mill site, which was included. A number of presentations highlighted how financially underwater the city will be if the mill site does not happen. In 2021, the council approved the budget with the assumption that the mill site development would bring in revenue. To approve the budget, assuming the mill site development will bring revenue to balance the budget, for me says that the council has bias to approve the mill site development prior to doing a comprehensive environmental study. In 2021, the council members have expressed bias to approve the mill site in a public meeting, and to me, this is appalling. Inconsistent with previous quasi-judicial hearings, council heard environmental concerns for Snoqualmie Hills West, the concern that development was lack of water testified to by the owner of the mill site development, Mr. Stroof. During the hearing, Mayor Larson introduced Mr. Stroof as an expert. Mr. Stroof expressed his concern about the lack of water for the mill site development if the Snoqualmie Hills West development were to happen. As of this afternoon, the city's past due update of their water system plan has not been approved. Between the 2013 and current proposed water system plan, there are projections that the city will run out of instantaneous water in a couple of years. The city has not responded to a number of emailed concerns to the city regarding the water system plan. North Bend is running out of potable water and is trying to buy Salal Water Association.
Please finish your comment.
I don't think that I can quickly sum up. It goes on for pages.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next, Dan Vince, excuse me.
Points for close.
Good evening. My name is Dan Vince. I live in 34516 Southeast Linden Loop in Snoqualmie. I've lived here for 22 years. And really, I don't have a dog in this race, but I have been following the mill project for some time now. And I'm just here to say that I think, number one, it'll be very good for the city. I think it'll be good for the residents of Snoqualmie. I think it'll be also very good for the environment. It'll increase our tax base. We no longer have the mitigation fees that we've had for years from the developers, which have really paid for a lot of infrastructure here. So we really need to increase our tax base going forward. And all of that money that will be available from this will be available for services and probably most importantly, help mitigate the tax burden on the residents of Snoqualmie, which is becoming more and more of a problem for a lot of people here. I think this project also does a very good job, we've talked about, really promoting tourism in the valley. And that's an important part of our industry. I think the sad thing, talking about a lot of the people, they go to Snoqualmie Falls and they leave. Now they've got somebody else to stop. You know, we can make that a little stickier, have those people actually stay here for a little longer, spend a little more of their money here. It also, I love good wine, and it also will promote the growing wine industry here in the valley. I think we've got 9 wineries now here in the valley. A good source of both tourism, bringing people into the valley, and jobs. It also, I think very importantly, will give us an opportunity to clean up this site and clean it without taxpayer money. I think it's a shame that it should be left as it is. I think it needs to be cleaned up, and this gives an opportunity to actually do that and make that ground usable and of a benefit to the city and the people of the area. So kind of for those reasons, I heartily endorse the plan and hope you would support it also. So thank you.
Thank you. Spencer Smith, Sammamish.
Hi, everybody. Ms. Mayor and the council. So I represent a startup winery. So Dan is actually wrong. There's 10 now. We're still in barrel, though, or in bottle, and nothing's been released. So it's very much a startup. It's called Argonne Cellars. And I'm very committed to the Valley. And you say, well, why is this guy from Sammamish here? Well, I happened to really do kind of an in-depth look at the time, and I found a winemaker, and I'm engaged with him with my license. And the thing I would say is there's really a nascent winemaking industry out here. Y'all know it, but you don't really maybe know it. They're chomping at the bit to make this more professional, a little bit higher scale. And along the way, the community's been helping. In fact, we've got some Chardonnay from 21. We're going to bottle if there's any volunteers. I'll take them on. Dan will be there. So there's been a lot of heavy community involvement, and I fully intend when this thing scales to keep it here. I don't want to go to Woodinville. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, two other themes, I've got about 2 minutes left. There's a dearth of leasable property here. If you're going after something with charm, sort of the Woodinville chic kind of thing, right now, there's barely one storefront to potentially lease downtown. Doesn't exist. So I think the scale, which is the other piece that I'd really like to address that Tom has really derived in this plan, is exactly right. We're not talking about reproducing Woodinville with a bunch of drunken people running around. We're not talking about plowing down 1,000 acres of virgin forest. That's not the scale, and it wouldn't be the scale I'd frankly be interested in. I think it could really be a jewel and an asset and an adjunct to tourism, the tourism focus that's here, and quite frankly, as Kelly from the chamber mentioned, that doesn't go anywhere other than they go to the falls and then they drive back to wherever they came from. This would make a far stickier situation. I think it also does these three fantastic things. It helps mitigate environmental issues. It also provides some affordable housing, and God knows there isn't any affordable housing in between here and Kent. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it also happens to, I believe if I read correctly, preserve the majority of the land to it in a natural state. So I think it's a slam dunk. I don't know why anybody would really oppose this, and I think it serves to really push the Valley forward. And frankly, if I don't rent something from Tom, I don't know where I'll go. I'll probably go to Woodinville, and it'll be some overpriced. So there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
4 seconds left.
Is it Rami? You were in there? Okay. Please introduce your name.
Rami Kusal, 215 20th Avenue, Seattle, Washington. I'm here. I'm the city's review engineer and construction manager. I was asked to come here if there are any questions on engineering related to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Gamble? Am I wrong? I could be reading it totally wrong. Todd? Is there a Todd? Wait, left? Oh.
No, he's here.
The number? Okay. Okay. So is there anyone that didn't get a chance to sign up and still wanted to speak to this that hasn't already spoken? Not see anyone in the room raise their hand. One last chance online. If you haven't spoken and you didn't get a chance, went around and asked if you wanted to speak earlier, please raise your hand. Look online. I'm not seeing anyone. All right.
Mayor?
That's what to say?
I don't know if this is part of the procedures or not, but if there are folks that didn't finish before their time ran out, if they have any written statements, could they submit those to the city as well?
We were taking them until, what do you think, what's the comment? We're taking them until 6 PM.
The public hearing notice indicated written comments would be accepted through the adjournment of the hearing, which looks like is about upon us.
Well, we have more time, so we,
Can we use
yeah, yes, we will use that. So if you do want to submit your written comments, you can.
I can't understand you. What?
Yes, you can submit your written comments before we adjourn this hearing.
You won't be able to read it.
Okay. Next up would be staff comments. Are there any staff comments?
I don't have any additional comments at this point beyond, obviously, the council has heard from members of the public, and hopefully this will help inform the council's continued discussions and deliberations. I will clarify, we did receive a number of written comments prior to the public hearing this evening, one of which was from Mr. Shield, which contains a greater level of detail of his spoken comments. So you should have all that in email. I have hard copies I'll provide to you this evening as well. If any more come in, certainly I will circulate those and get a hard copy printed as well. Thank you.
Do you have a count? I have three.
I had three also, Mayor, yes.
Did you want to count written comments as well, or just?
And they were, one of the oral comments this evening was also the same as the written comment. So I think there were 6, Jason, were there 6 written comments this evening? So if you subtracted that, there were 5.
Against?
What's that were against, correct? So there were 5 written plus 2, I'm sorry, so the 6 plus, yeah, but I would, because there was overlap.
Right, so it'd be 8
Correct.
times 1.5. 2 minutes, okay. Okay, so our applicant, does the applicant want to rebut? You have up to 12 minutes to speak.
Good evening, I'm Courtney Kaler, the land use attorney for the project, and I'll make this quick. First, as council has heard, there were a number of written comments submitted, each of which would require more than 3 minutes, certainly, some of them many more, to respond to. So we would request a couple days to respond in writing to those written comments. And before we continue with our responses here, ask if the council will entertain that, which will affect how we respond here tonight.
Council, we entertained, there was several lengthy written comments. Councilmember Johnson?
I just want to hear from our legal counsel if that's a thing that we can do.
It's certainly the council's prerogative, and the hearing examiner did that after the public hearing on the PCI plan, allowed, I believe it was to the next Monday, it was almost a week, that she allowed additional time period for staff and the applicant to respond in writing to the written comments that came in at the tail end of the proceeding. So it would be consistent with how the matter was handled below.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
I'd like to see us continue with the public hearing until it's completed. Then I think the council is likely to take up a number of issues regarding hearing additional comments. So can we complete the public hearing and then address all that?
Yes, and then she will need to know this evening at the.
Thank you.
No.
So with that, a number of the written public comments did raise issues that relate to either the EIS or the PCI plan. And just for the record, I want to object to those portions of those letters. I appreciate the council has been very conscientious in directing comments specifically to the development agreement tonight, and would hope the council would not consider those improper portions of the written comments. In order to address both those written comments and the verbal comments we've heard tonight, we will hear from Richard Weinman, who is virtual. He will identify those portions of the EIS that respond to the written comments addressing the EIS, just so the council is directed to those parts of the record that respond. Cliff Schmidt, who is here today, will speak very briefly to hazardous cleanup, and then Mr. Srofe will conclude. Thank you.
All right, so Richard Wyman.
Yes. I'll just go down the list fairly quickly, identifying the topic and then where information can be found in the draft EIS and or final EIS. So questions about environmental health and contamination, that is found in draft EIS section 3.5 and appendix D. And responses to comments are in final EIS section 3.6. Cultural resource issues are addressed in the draft EIS section 3.10. And more specifically, responses to the tribe's letter is in section 3.10- is finally EIS section 3.10-4, and a comment in a letter about the Japanese bunkhouse community that's in final EIS section 3.10.3. There are a couple of comments about impacts on downtown businesses. Those are addressed in the final EIS section 3.15.2. Funding of improvements and fiscal and economic impacts, and how and when improvements will be constructed and by whom are addressed in final EIS section 3.11.12, related to transportation. In general, economic benefits to the city are addressed in final EIS section 3.15.3 and 3.15.4. Transportation overall is addressed in draft EIS section 3.11 and appendix F, and final EIS 3.11. Water supply, let me find that. That's in most current information is in final EIS section 3.14.
Thank you. Who is the second person that was? Oh.
Thank you. My name is Cliff Schmidt. I'm a 24-year resident of Falls City. I'm a principal hydrogeologist and was involved with much of the environmental evaluation and was in the draft EIS. I have a consulting company which is local. We have about 120 employees. I've been doing cleanups for 37 years, many which are in this area and in the Seattle area. The process of cleanup of contaminated properties or brownfields is something that often is done in conjunction with redevelopment. That's how these get funded. So, for instance, in the South Lake Union area, which years ago was a place I would not even go, today is a very vibrant community, very nicely done. I work on at least 10 of those projects in that area. This is the pathway that we go through these old legacy sites cleaned up. Much of it was cleaned up by Weyerhaeuser. They didn't complete the job, probably. But we have an opportunity here to make right on this legacy contamination. Having a development go through to fund future cleanup of planning areas 2 and 3 is the process that would be normal for this type of problem and will get the job done. There's not such a thing as when you become liable for a cleanup on a property, you don't become unliable because you want to walk away from the project. The Snoqualmie Ventures is a liable party for that cleanup, as is Weyerhaeuser, as is King County. So there will be cleanup of that property eventually. I guess that's really the comments I wanted to make, other than I also really enjoy Washington wines. I would like to not drive to Woodinville to go partake of those. So I would be more than happy to come up here to Snoqualmie more often. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, was Mr. Strofe finishing it up?
I've got 5 minutes left. What can I do? The only thing I'd like to follow up, in addition to Mr. Wyman's references to where those issues are discussed in the environmental review in the document itself, they are also reflected in the 50 conditions of approval. So you'll see reference to what we're going to do with the Japanese community. We're going to see reference to all the other things that got converted to analysis, to action and mediation. And that's the document that is going to be part of the development agreement and the PCI plan to complete the loop and just get that all into sync. So it is a contract that we all understand and can operate under for the next 20 years. That's really the only thing I've got to add. I think this is a beginning of a good conversation. I appreciate your attention and the time. You guys have worked really hard and made a big commitment of your own personal lives for this process. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. So council, we need to respond to, the written comments that were received, what type of length of time should we give the applicant to be able to respond to those? Roger Mayhew?
Yeah, can you explain to us what requirement makes us answer that particular question?
So the applicant made a request, applicant's counsel, at the start of her rebuttal comments, asking whether they would be permitted some time to respond in writing to the written comments that arrived just today. In particular, there were a couple that were lengthy that came in the middle of the afternoon to late afternoon. And my comment to, and I was just double checking this time period, is that is the process that was followed below when some speakers, there was a public hearing held on the PCI plan on March 30th. Some members of the public submitted written comments either at the end of that time period or early the next morning for folks who said that they couldn't make connectivity. The hearing examiner allowed the applicant and the city until April 5th to submit written comments in response to the written comments that were submitted later. And the reason for the request, as I think Ms. Kaler explained, was the length of the written comments makes it difficult to respond on the fly to something that long in this time period. So I don't know if that answers your question, but try.
The answer I heard is there is no requirement, there's a request.
No requirement, correct.
Yes.
So Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
Yeah, just for clarity, is the public hearing still open or is that now closed?
It is still open until I hit the gavel.
So I have motions to make, but I'll wait for the public hearing to close.
All right, so we have no further speakers. Everyone that spoke that wanted to speak had opportunity to speak, so I now declare the public hearing closed at 8:11 p.m. There you go. Thank you. So council? Councilmember Holloway?
No.
Okay. And we have options. It could be a day, it could be the end of this week. Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
Yeah, so at this stage, we have not had any chance to deliberate or we've not really had any chance to deliberate this proposed development agreement. I think we intend to spend a fair amount of time on that and get through that, during which time the agreement may change. I think during that process, I at least will be interested in probably hearing public input from the public. It was my understanding in lead up to tonight's meeting that this was not the last opportunity for us to hear from the public. My own thought is, there was a number of, I thought I heard a number of people indicating that they would like to submit additional comments. I'd like to see those comments. I'd like very much to hear from the developer on their considered rebuttal to the various things that were brought up. I'd like them to have the time to do that. I'd also like to have them have a chance to see any additional comments and respond to those. So I'd like to see a process where we allow some time for additional comments to come in writing. We need to have an end to that so that the developer knows an amount of time to, or knows when they are done and can now just address, they've got a set of things to address. So I'd like to see us allow time for both of those things to happen. We're going to be considering this for several weeks in any event. So, you know, I'd move that we allow additional comments, written comments for the next week, and that we then allow an additional period of time for developer rebuttal of those comments for another week beyond that. Although if that turns out to be too short a time for the developer, given the quantity of comments, then I think I'd be open to hearing a request from them. But I'd move that a week for additional written comments and then an additional week beyond that for written rebuttal from the applicant.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew and second by, it was a race though. Okay, Councilor Christensen, to allow written comment to, excuse me, to remain open for one more week, and then to allow additional week for the developer to rebuttal it. Oh, yeah, figure out.
Just a point of clarification for perhaps the maker of the motion. I think the current schedule contemplated possible council action on the 26th, which is 2 weeks from tonight. So if you went a week and a week, would run into that, which may mean you want to adjust the schedule, or alternatively, if you want to try to stay on track with that, you could do something like additional written comments by this Friday, developer response by Friday the 23rd, which would give council then the weekend to review whatever had come in rebuttal in advance of Monday. It's only the weekend, but it would give you some time period between when the rebuttal would come in and your Monday meeting. Just a suggestion.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
Move to amend the dates in the motion to the dates suggested by Attorney Sturbank.
Second. This is moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew, second by Councilor Christensen to, what are the dates?
Would be Friday the 16th
Okay.
for additional written comments from the public.
On the 23rd. And the 23rd, and rebuttal by
Applicant
the
rebuttal by close of business Friday the 23rd.
Okay.
Should be not quite a week for the first and then a full week for rebuttal.
Right. Councilor Holloway?
Just for clarity, I agree with additional week for the public, but can you say a public and opponent who requested additional time to have their submittal? I know they're part of the public, but just acknowledge that they asked to be able to submit.
Do we need a second?
Is it? Like an opponent? Is it?
Public comment and opponent comment?
Public and opponent?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so can you read back?
Brian.
Was that a motion?
Oh, that's really, what's his name?
No, I know.
Okay.
Yeah. Was it a motion?
Move to include in the public comment submittal by Friday, the opponent to the project. May I have a second?
Second.
So it's moved by Councilor Holloway and second by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew to add the word opponent to public and opponent.
Point of order, I can't remember how many dinosaurs deep we're allowed to go.
It's around a third.
Many as you want.
Okay, I thought there was a limit.
We can go to the Cretaceous period if you'd like.
Okay, so read back the motion. Any further discussion on this total? Oh, so it is a third, so I think we were okay. Thank you.
The first motion was to approve another week for written comments and then an additional week for rebuttal from the applicant. And then we amended to say this Friday for public comment. Oh, sorry. Then we amended to say this Friday for additional public comments, and then Friday the 23rd for rebuttal. And then we did another amendment to include the word opponent and to public comment.
Okay.
By this Friday, right?
And Mayor, just for clarification, I believe Councilmember Holloway's motion referring to opponent was Snoqualmie Community Action Network.
Correct.
Just so everyone knows what we're referring to.
Okay.
Seconded by Jim.
So for the littlest dinosaur, do we have any discussion on this? Okay, so we shall approve adding the opponent, which is scan, to this motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we are amending or allowing public comment
16th.
and opponent scan to the 16th, and the applicant can respond by the 23rd.
Close business, yes.
Close business. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay. So the original, we've kind of wiped out the original motion.
Wiped it out, yeah.
So I think we have, once you read back the whole motion
As it stands with
as
the
it
amendments?
stands, with the amendments.
Okay, so with the amendments, we're allowing for additional written comments, written and opponent comments by Friday the 16th. We're allowing for rebuttal from the applicant until Friday the 23rd. And that's it, right?
We had opponent and public.
Yeah, I said opponent and
Okay,
written comments.
so all in favor of that total motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. So we are done with the public hearing, and we will actually move on to the rest of our council agenda. We really appreciate everyone's time tonight, and you don't feel obligated to stay, or you are welcome to stay. Anyway, okay, so moving on to next item on the agenda is AB 22-135, appointment to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission. Want to take a break? How about if we take a 5-minute break while everyone's
Leaving.
up and about? Anyway, okay.
Anyone want to know how the game finished?
All right. We are back after a brief recess. So the next item on the agenda is
The written ones.
AB 22-135, appointment to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission. I'm appointing Steve Pennington to the vacant position number 1 on the Snoqualmie Arts Commission, expiring January 31st, 2024. Steve Pennington has served on the Arts Commission previously. He's a photographer for wine walks and other events. He's also an artist, and he works as a project manager. Council, may I have a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
It was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew and second by Councilor Holloway to approve Steve Pennington to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission. Is there any public comment regarding appointing Steve? I'm seeing no one raising their hand. Any discussion, Council?
Can you bring donuts?
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Move to adjourn.
Okay, so seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes, and we have appointed Mr. Pennington to the Snoqualmie Arts Commission. And he is in the audience. Does he want to say a few words or just wave and say hi?
My wife said 20 minutes for opposition. No, I'm very excited. Thank you so much for having me and letting me come back to the Arts Commission. I was here for 3 years, and they signed you up for much longer terms back then, so I had to leave early. But I attended the meeting today as a member of the public. There's lots to do, lots of change, and I'm excited to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for volunteering. Right. Next item is City Council Committee and Liaison Appointments. Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew, would you please advise the appointments?
Yes, move to appoint Councilmember Watton as the liaison to the Meadowbrook Farm Preservation Association and appoint as alternate liaison Councilmember Johnson.
Second.
Yes, preservation, yes, preservation. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, so it's motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew and second by Councilmember Johnson to appoint Councilmember Watton to the Meadowbrook Preservation.
Society?
No.
Meadowbrook Farm Preservation
Farm
Association.
Preservation. Okay, right. And Councilmember Johnson as the alternate. You have your hand up?
Yeah, just quickly, council members, currently, Councilmember Johnson is the liaison. Due to the meetings and the time it takes and so forth, Councilmember Watton has agreed to take on the primary responsibility, and Councilmember Johnson will be the alternate. So I think it's just fantastic that they both have interest in this and have kind of worked out a way to make sure we're well represented there.
Right. Is there any public comment regarding this? Not seeing anyone raise their hands. Okay, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, it's unanimous. Congratulations. So moving on, we have AB 22-132, which is a model train presentation. And we have Ms. Peter Hamling will present his vision of an interpretive model train museum that will promote a cultural, historical, educational, and entertaining tourism experience for the city of Snoqualmie. And the model train is replica of Northwest Trunk Line and 1,000 square foot building with parking and feature the model train along with community event space, a gift shop, and other interactive features, as well as outdoor recreational park with picnic benches and other improvements. And the proposed museum would be located on the city-owned property known as the Gateway Park. So I will invite Mr. Hamling or his crew up for the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Ross and city staff, council members. Thanks for inviting us here to tell you about this. I don't know how much background you have from the brochures that we handed out. There's a bit of miscommunication how many got handed out, but I'll describe to you what Northwest Trunk Lines is, our vision, mainly my vision for what we'd like to do with it, and why we're here talking to you.
So are they going to put the presentation up? Who has that?
Yeah, or at least one of the images.
Yeah.
Any of you have the background brochures that we handed out?
Yeah.
A little bit about it.
do.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
really
yeah.
excited to see that your crewman is no longer being held captive underneath the train. That's
Yeah,
really
and
great.
I'll also confess sheepishly, this is my first city council meeting anywhere. So.
Us too.
Forgive me if I step out of line, don't mean to. So let me describe Northwest Trunk Lines. I like railroads. I'm not a model railroader per se, but I have a very strong creative drive and a lot of history behind this, some of it embarrassing. We started construction of this in 2006. It's a 1/48 scale, line L, O scale model railroad that's in the basement of our home in Medina. We live at 7811 Northeast 10th Street, Medina. It's a little bit of a city secret. Mike Sauerland kind of knew about it, but didn't know whose it was. So we built this house in 2001, and confession, we nixed the basement because you can't always build things, everything you want to build is expensive. About 2 years later, I decided we need a model railroad, and so we built a basement of the house we built without the basement to do this, and started construction in 2006. It's 3,700 square feet. There's a half mile of track. If you start in one location and you follow that train around the longest circuitous serpentine route, you will come back to where you started, having walked a quarter mile. So it's big. I always had this vision that we would eventually move it out of the basement. Part of the problem with model railroads is they're built by somebody. A lot of life and effort goes into it, and then they pass away or they move out and it gets lost. So beginning in 2006, we designed and engineered and constructed it to be moved out of the basement. So there's 175 different sections that can be unbolted, taken out, and reconstructed, reassembled somewhere else. I had this vision also that it would be ultimately put in a museum. We've entertained a lot of charity events, Children's Hospital, Angel Flight, local schools. And it's the kind of thing that appeals to people of all ages, little kids to very old folks who may or may not have any interest in trains. And that's because it's an imagination, a dip into an imagination experience, an illusion for a moment. And people are fascinated with it. Most people we show it to come out looking kind of shell-shocked, kind of stunned. They've never seen anything like this. My wife and I, my willing wife, I should say, have put $4 million into it. It's been appraised at $5 million. It models 14 different locations around the Western US, railroad locations. Each of those places we visited took photographs and soil samples. The scenery backdrop painted by Andy Uckleshaw out of Edmonds, very gifted artist, much like this, painted that scenery to those locations. The locations are finished in the real dirt from those locations. And the soundtrack, which is done by Pete Berggren, who's the sound engineer for the Dr. Phil show, has soundtracks for each of the locations for day and night. And probably has subliminal stuff in there as well. So we started with a crew of 8 to 10 full-time. We still have a crew of 3 full-time. 2 of them are here. Todd Gamble has done almost all of the topography and scenery on the layout. And lives in Snoqualmie, you probably know him. David Hazelton lives in Issaquah, has done almost all the operations and the mechanical, electrical. The whole thing is driven by a software program that can run 7, 8, 10 trains at a time. Rob Nelson, sort of our crew chief, is on vacation with his 4-month-old baby in Wisconsin, so he couldn't make it. And I have to say I'm very honored to have helping us a very skilled consultant, Howard Lovering, right here. He'll speak shortly. Howard was the founding executive director of the Flight Museum for 17 years. And he was the wheels that made that what it is, which is one of the best in the country. Put in perspective, there's over 100 engines, over 125 passenger cars, and over 550 freight cars. I've long ago lost track of exactly what those numbers are. 40,000 trees we made ourselves. It goes on and on. It's quite impressive. Many have told me it's considered one of, if not the best in the United States. Pretty impressive. So I always wanted to move it out of the basement, put it in a museum next to a railroad, a real railroad. So when you go visit this, you come out of an imagination journey for an hour, maybe 2, and there's a real train. And that's why we're talking to you. We would want to put up a museum especially for this on the corner of Railroad Parkway and Railroad Avenue and Snoqualmie Parkway in cooperation with the city. I very much want it to be a cooperative thing with a city like Snoqualmie. So that's why I'm here talking to you. I guess we would suggest that if the city prepared and leased the land, we would then, my wife Lori and I would then pay to have the model railroad disassembled, taken out, moved, and put back together. When I say put back together, it currently is not ADA friendly. It has aisles that are less than 3 feet. You need 3 in one direction and 5 in 2 directions. It has a couple of walk-unders that are 77 inches, not 80 inches. So what we would do is take it apart, move it, put it back together, and expand it slightly. So that would bring it from currently 3,700 square feet to about 8,000 square feet. You'd have to just make it bigger. If it's in a museum, in my view, it needs to be a living exhibit. It can't be static. Part of the attraction of a model train is things are moving. It's not just sitting there. There's always something to distract you a little bit. But I think over time, if you want to attract the kind of patrons or kind of visitors to that, you have to show them something different in 6 months or 9 months than they saw before. And for that, then we would evolve it, if you like, develop it from 8,000 to 15,000 square feet. That's just the layout. So to take that and put that in a building, realistically, you're talking 20,000 feet, maybe 25 on 2 levels. So the ground level would be the layout, upper mezzanine, walk around, would be room for event space, and looking down, lights on the ceiling, so on. It's a big project. I can't tell you the details because I don't have them yet. We're just feeling our way here. I want to know if the city would be interested in this, and if so, ultimately, we would want to have some sort of formal agreement to look at it together. That's what we're asking, a MOU or a letter of agreement of some sort, just to make it a bit more formal and to give each of us some responsibility and some conviction that the other one's pulling their weight. I'll let Howard speak to this, but part of this vision, in my view, I started a business 31 years ago, and it's been very successful and still is. It's now in the second generation from my partner and me. Our sons are running it. I know how to do that, not so much a museum. So to me, a museum needs to make money. It needs to be a thriving business. It can't look to a city like Snoqualmie for support. If we get that as well, that's fine. But I think the presumption we have is if this is going to make sense, we have to see it make sense by itself, just on ticket sales. Howard can speak to that in a minute, but that's one of the things that we want to make sure we understand. And the other one is that it really fits in and supports the community. By that I mean it supports people who live here, the people who do business here, the visitors who come here, whether they want to or they're part of a school effort or whatever. It has to fit in. I think the fact that 3 of these guys, Rob Nelson also lives nearby in North Bend, the fact that 3 of these guys who've been building this for over 10 years want to stay with this and keep going when it becomes a museum, I think is a big deal to me. They live here. That's, to my mind, very important, that we don't lose them. They've had a lot of history with putting this in place. I think in a nutshell, it's an extraordinary, I guess you could call it a piece of art, maybe even a national treasure. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen other model railroad exhibits. They're good, but not like this. I'll let Howard speak to the feasibility. He's been very helpful to us in the last year. And mainly, I think, in raising my consciousness that this is a real jewel. His comment to me after he first saw it was, "I've never seen anything like this." And he can speak from a lot of experience. So let me introduce him. Howard Lovering.
Thank you, Peter. I'm a museum planner and know nothing about model railroads. But when colleagues suggested that I take a look at what Peter had in his basement and what his wife would like to see put up somewhere out in public display, I was happy to do it. But I had the same experience that all of you have had, or all of those who have seen this have had, and that is I was seeing something really unique. And I could tell immediately that this thing could stand alone as an entertaining and educational attraction of great significance, perhaps even national significance because of the quality of detail. I've worked with Peter and the staff just to do the museum due diligence. How do you move something from a private basement into the public sector and make it an attraction? Some of that's in the brochure. I'll summarize very quickly. We looked at comparables as you do. There were 3 that nationally that stuck out to us. Each of them was a slightly different model, but very sustainable and actually very successful. The big gallery at the Chicago Museum of Science and Industry, which some of you may have seen, extremely successful. A gallery in an existing museum, that's a model. The second that we found that was really viable was in Balboa Park. This was a partnership between City and County of San Diego and a nonprofit. and it has co-tenancy in a historic building, Balboa Park. A really good display, not of Peter's quality in scope and detail. And the third was in a mountain town of Greeley, Colorado, which kind of surprised me. Some of you may have seen that one. I haven't talked to the people there, but it's a freestanding museum of its own, done with municipal help on property and also in building, run by a nonprofit that's chartered and focused just to run the museum. And in that mountain community, which has streams of tourists passing through, it's successful. And it told us something, me as a museum planner told me something in that they're able to really do a good job with operations because of the strong component of volunteerism. And that's a huge thing here. We did a lot of thought about staffing and operations. So we had these sort of three possibilities that could be done. An existing exhibit with putting in a new gallery, a municipality that wanted to work with a stand alone, or as a tenant in an existing building. Peter made it clear as owner that he wanted to stay in the region. He'd like it to be in a community that had rail history. And I think that made a lot of sense. And when this property was brought to his attention and we looked at it, it just seemed to be an opportunity that we should pursue. We're prepared to answer. We've done a lot of planning on how to make this sustainable, how to staff it, how to make it a top attraction, the best of its kind in the country, I think, in my opinion. And we can answer those questions at any time.
So, kind of different. I guess what we'd like to hear from you is whether you have interest in pursuing this further. We're currently, I'll share this, we're talking to City of Tacoma, Port of Edmonds, and North Bend, and Harvey Field, which is up in Snoqualmie. So I don't want to, yeah.
Let's have the video.
Yeah, have you guys seen the King 5 evening video?
It was just playing.
Yeah, it was just playing.
They, most time when people come to see this, they want to spend 20 minutes and they end up spending an hour and a half or 2 hours. And that was the case with St. Brian and his video guy. And so when they showed up at the front door of our house, I said, I have two requirements before I let you in. One is you can't show the house or tell anybody where it is, or me. And secondly, I'm not going to be on camera. These guys are, because they're the ones who did it. What's that? Would you guys like to see it? If you want to take the time, happy.
If you don't.
3 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty well done.
I was watching it while you were talking. I don't know.
I think we were
As long
missing
as
a
it has
sound.
audio.
What's it? Yeah. So I want to add, while they're doing this, I'm the visionary, we're the cash register, but these guys have put their life into this, and that really means much more than money. It's they put their life.
Engineered to match every location, their smoke, and even the smell of.
A lot of the people that come in here don't even know that they love model trains until they come down here and they look at it and go, wow.
Wow just might be the best way to describe it. 20 of the West's most scenic stretches of railway lines from Washington to Colorado can be found replicated in the basement of a Medina millionaire who has hired 3 people working nearly full time to keep it running.
When I started, this was a big empty basement.
That was 2008. It's not empty anymore. 80 locomotives and nearly 500 cars travel on 3/4 of a mile of track through desert landscapes and forests made up of tens of thousands of trees.
my goal with this job is to make it so you don't see what I do.
Let's just check out our voltage here.
I try to hide all the wiring, all the electrical, everything that would kind of take you out of that full immersion experience.
A single touch of a button sets off a series of computer programs and timers. There's a 24-hour lighting cycle that simulates day and night, a sound system engineered to match every location. There's smoke and even the smell of burning wood at the site of a forest fire. And in an old town, a shootout like the one in Once Upon a Time in the West.
I have scratch built every single building on here. I painted all of the figures, set up all of the scenes, and built the chuck wagon.
Scenery artist Jennifer Thoreau has been working in the basement since 2011.
We try to be as authentic as possible.
How hard do they try?
So the effort that goes into this is pretty crazy.
They've gone on road trips to collect dirt from the real-life locations.
Some of this dirt's been hauled 5 miles down trails in 5-gallon buckets of soaking wet dirt, all for authenticity.
It all adds up to a masterpiece of model railroading, all hidden away in one man's basement, but maybe not forever.
This is something that needs to be shared with the public.
The layout is designed in sections so it can be removed. Someday, these trains, hurtling across bridges and along riverbanks, may be arriving in a place where you can see them too.
Everyone from the homeowners on down, we're all on board with putting it up in a public location and really being able to share what we've created with everyone who's interested.
That's great.
There you go. I'd be quick to point out, even being a millionaire in Medina doesn't really get you very much. Heard that one. You have to. They did this 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Like Evening Magazine.
We didn't invite them. They found out about it and they kind of approached me and so yeah, it's a little nutty, but it's pretty cool. And I think it would be. To my view, it'd be really cool for you guys to have it. Lori and I would gift it, by the way, and then we would move it, put it back together, and help kind of seed the financial aspect of it to end up like this. This is one of the incredible sketches that Todd has done. He can do this, I would say, in a matter of a couple hours, maybe a bit more than that. He's very gifted, and so. We've tried different reorientations of the layout and different evolutions of it, and then in different building shapes. And we've done quite a few that would fit on this property, different styles and stuff. This is just one of them. But yeah, we'd love to move it here in a nutshell.
So, Councilmember Johnson?
So my fellow council members, I had the pleasure of getting to tour the site, and it is truly hard to express the size and scale of what they've done and the level of detail. Just a few notes that I was taking here that came to mind that you did see a little bit in the video that I just wanted to point out that kind of blew my mind. It does run on a day-night cycle, which is really cool. They have all these extra little details that you can find all throughout the whole exhibit. They have these mining tunnels so you can look into, and you can see the miners in there, and they do various things. They have working funiculars going up and down mountains. You would have seen those in the video. They mentioned the forest fires with the faux smoke that you can even smell. It smells like smoke, even though it's not really smoke, so you won't worry about fire alarms. I think probably my favorite part, though, was when I was getting just toward the end, and not being a big train junkie like some people are, who would travel probably across the country to see this, by the way. I didn't really recognize specifically a lot of places, but I got to one spot and I said, oh, I know where this is. I went to college here. It was the Feather River. Well, college was near there in California, and I was looking around. I said, this looks really cool. I get it now. People would travel to see this kind of thing. And there are just all these little hidden landscapes that you can't really see very well from where it is right now. But I tried to imagine in my mind not being in this little basement, but even having the catwalks overhead and all that stuff, allowing you to see everything. There's a lot of detail that I couldn't even see because it was kind of hidden behind things due to the space they were in. And I'm really excited about the modularity of the whole system, how you could take pieces out and put in, say, a holiday scene or whatever else. So anyway, I think this is really cool, and I would love to pursue this. I also love the connection between one of our most visited sites, and downtown, kind of getting people from one place to another. And there's the possibility for the train to be involved due to that location. So hopefully we can make some things happen, and I'm very supportive.
Councilor Benson, thank you.
I think we would be insane to let Tacoma or North Bend get this. I think there's a whole new demographic that would be drawn to Snoqualmie to see model trains. Not to mention the fact that, the point that you made, that people who come to see the train are going to be drawn to see it as well. I think it would just be nuts to miss out on this. I think we should make this happen. But I don't want to get over my skis or anything.
Councilor Say.
So I shared this with the mayor when she first introduced it to him. My uncle was a retired Boeing engineer, spent almost 35 years with the company, built a model train in his basement, figured out how to take it apart and move it to his house on Anderson Island when they retired, figured out again how to get it moved to storage when he no longer could live independently in that location. And before he passed away, was able to donate it to his church in Covington. And now it's an outdoor exhibit for all the kids to see out in the play area, and they have a number of different programs they've set up. It's nothing like what you've done here. But you have my full support of figuring out how to make this happen.
Very kind. To me, it's when you have like a 2-year-old, you can give them a box and they'll make anything out of that box, like a car and so to me, what happens is people go down and see this, and it brings them back to a style of their life when they're young, when they imagined everything, because that's what it is. It's an imagination journey. You don't have to be into trains. So even people we have shown this to who really otherwise wouldn't have any interest in railroads, they're just like captivated. And it's really, to me, that's the biggest reward of it, is watching the reaction on people's faces. A lot of people think it's a train set around the Christmas tree. And they just start going, wow. And I said, well, you haven't even seen it. You just started over here and you haven't gone, well, there's more. Yeah, and then they disappear and they're gone for like 45 minutes. So the reaction to me is the reward, very much so.
Actually, I have a question for, now the city attorney's back, because I wanted to ask. You okay over there?
Yes.
All right. I remember we've looked in the past at other potential developments in this corner, whether the park or other sort of options, gift center, all those sorts of things. And I have it in my head that there was an easement issue with this property. Is there any explanation on that? Am I remembering things that?
You are close. It's not an easement, but it was dedicated to the city for specific types of public uses. There's like a public park, open space, museum. There are limitations. It came as part of the Kimball Creek mixed-use final plan. So there are some strands or strings in that ball of yarn to unravel. It's not to say that we haven't identified anything that would be a barrier to this. It's just not simple and straightforward.
Okay.
So there'll be some steps and some work to do.
So let's figure out how to make it simple and straightforward.
Right, and so from the staff standpoint, the suggestion that we do more work and come back with an MOU makes perfect sense, because it would give us an opportunity to address some questions just like that.
Right. Councilor Christensen?
I'd love to hear more about how the financials would work and how the agreements would work and things like that. But just generally speaking, I do think this would be fantastic for our area. I think it ties in really well. As a parent, I know like little kids would love it. As an adult, I mean, we were frequently at like the Transport Museum in London, and you have all different ages of people coming to see, and it's so wonderful to see the miniatures and then to have the opportunity to go out and see it in real life, I think would be wonderful.
Councilor Holloway, did you?
So, I guess I'm looking for the bullet points of what I'm being asked. If we're looking for agreement of leasing the property, we can probably come to closure on that. But I think I'm being asked more than that, but I haven't seen what the more is. The city has the property, you have the train set up.
Yep.
You would move it to the property,
Yep.
to a building. Whose building is that?
Well, it would be ultimately owned by the city. I don't expect, Howard, you can help me with this, but I don't expect the city would give us the land. It would be a lease, and
Right.
at the expiration of that lease term, the city would own not only the land, but whatever's on it, the building included.
Okay, and then there would be, so I'm back up then. So who would pay for the building of that building?
TBD. I mean, Lori and I would pay to move it, take it apart, move it, set it up, expand it. We would probably,
Right.
I mean, this is a straw, or what do you call it, a trial. We'd probably end up with a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, but it would be making money, so it'd be plowing back. We would probably seed that with some of our company's stock, but at the end of the day, we want it back out of supporting it 100%, which is what we're doing now. So we would look to the city to help us figure out together, how do we do that? Maybe a private placement, I don't know.
Are you looking for financial contribution to the cost of that building?
That hasn't been discussed. We haven't had the opportunity to even get that far here in Snoqualmie. And it needs to be, it's not untypical. If we were to look at what would be a typical arrangement for the standard museum in this region and in this country, it's often municipal land, participation in the building itself, the structure, whether it exists or it's built new, and in some cases, even continuing operating expense. We don't think this institution in the early planning that I'm doing will have any need for sustainability operating subsidies. And we can get into that in spades. We haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss it. There are various ways of doing it. The municipality is going to own this if it owns the land and makes it available. However, if it's on a nominal lease, all improvements accrue to it over time at some point. At least in my experience in most areas. The expectation would be, is there a way of finding also municipal help in building? If I were to ask right now, what's the pitch? But that's why we said we kind of wanted to have a favorable response to working with staff to come back with a package to you. How it would be operated, the municipality can elect to do it if they have a parks division or a cultural division that wishes to do that, or the lease can be with a nonprofit chartered just for the purpose of operating. That has not been done either, because some of the other options don't require that. If it were to go into an existing museum, we don't have to do that. It's a good question. And it needs some work, and we'd like to work with staff on that. That's why the request was, this is not a package that's to be voted on. It was just a request to work with staff to come up with something that might work for the city of Snoqualmie.
Okay, and I'm supportive, but I'm also a numbers guy. Let's work out those numbers. I'm semi-jaded from an emotional purchase we did some time ago of an artificial skate rink, which never quite lived up to the emotions.
An artificial skate rink?
Good question. But we'll go on that another time.
Hang on, sorry, this is for your court. What is an artificial skate rink?
It's a garbage. It's a polymer
Picking a
plastic.
poke. That's picking a
Don't
poke.
go there. Councilor Watton?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Holloway.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And
We were not on it. That was
Mr.
their
Hamling,
decision.
thank you so much for bringing this forward. And I'm a huge, like, kind of railroad geek, even though I wouldn't admit it. And I've been to places like Sacramento and Kansas City and St. Paul, and our railroad here is every bit as good as those big railroad museums, and this would be a huge compliment. I guess my only comment to it is that if the building were done through a nonprofit, a 501c3, I think that would make it much more palatable, with the notion that the city would help with the land arrangement and some sort of lease agreement. But for me, I think that's the one piece that I'd like to see. I think it's amazing. It would just be such a plus for the 3 million, almost 3 million, 2.3 million people that come down the Parkway and make the turn at the left, and they don't turn downtown here to help give us that missing piece. So anyway, those are my comments.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
You don't want this in Tacoma or Edmonds. Come on. You need to be talking to us.
You wouldn't be able to smell the fire.
You definitely want to talk to us. I think the reaction I had, so in my world, MOUs mean a thing and LOIs mean a different thing. I think what we're talking about here is a request. Are we serious about this, and can we enter into serious conversation? If that's the request, my sense is, I just heard, so my little hobby is to count votes. I try to get to the number 4, and I love to get to the number 7. I think I'm getting to the number 7. So I think the answer is, please move forward in discussions on this. Let's explore. We're never going to figure out here in this kind of a forum all the details of what kind of, how would this be organized, how it would work. But I'm absolutely confident in our staff and your ability to work through all of that. Wouldn't hurt if you brought that Air Force One out here too. We could find a place for that. But anyway, I think as far as some form of formalization of that level of interest, let's do that. As far as beyond that, I think we'd have to get into details and understand what we were actually being asked. So I wouldn't take the hesitation. I had the same hesitation as some of my fellow council members, but all that is I don't actually understand what the question is. So let's figure that out, because I think we're all pretty excited about trying to figure that out with you.
That's really nice to hear. I will say the demeanor in this meeting is a little different than that.
So should we bring forward a resolution then, so that we will, or MOU to go forward and work with Northwest Trunk Lines? It'd be similar to what we did with the Y initially. Right, I'm seeing some yeses.
So would this be something, I assume we just sign over to the Community Development Committee?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We bring it
great.
to your committee. Councilor Holloway?
Would he consider an option to backfill the basement with a artificial skating rink?
Okay. Councilor Johnson?
Give you a good deal.
Couple little bits I just want to add to this. One is, you notice there's a little depot there. So in our vision, Todd's drawing, that's the depot that's at Snoqualmie Falls that we were trying to talk to the tribe to move our PSC, I'm not sure who owns it, move it there from where it is now, which is kind of hidden. The other thing I wanted to just mention in passing, that the layout was designed by a guy named John Armstrong, who's gone now. He's a really interesting man. He was kind of the dean of model railroad layout design. He was a consultant for the real railroads, but he was an engineer for the Naval Weapons Lab in Maryland. And I went to visit him a couple years before he passed away. He was getting up there, and he had a little modest house in Silver Spring, and a legendary layout called the Canandaigua Southern. He took me down these steep stairs into this layout, and within 5-10 minutes, I had no idea how to get back out. And it was a little house. The footprints about the size of this room, and I had no, it was all kind of back, very, very clever man, and a wonderful man, and we built the layout that he hand designed for us in the basement we didn't have. So there's a lot of fun history. I have a habit of doing things the hard way. It's far more expensive, but it's way more fun. But I'm happy to share some of this later. Yeah, and obviously it would be delightful to have you here because these guys all live here, and they've got very much a commitment to seeing it happen, seeing it continue.
They don't want to drive to Tacoma.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, so sometimes staff will bring some sort of a project and it'll have this big number on it. And they'll say that, oh, it's being paid for by some sort of a grant. I'm like, oh, okay, so we're not even the ones really paying for it out of tax dollars or anything. So anyway, all I'm saying is that there are a lot of different funding possibilities that they could look into. We don't have to be thinking of this as something that's going to be coming out of tax dollars necessarily, but that's all stuff that they're going to work out. And I'm eager to see what they come up with.
Excellent.
Last thing I want to say is I would love to have you guys come visit it one by one, or what, you can't do it more than 3 at a time, I think, or something like that. But,
Volunteer.
You've been
Can I
invited.
bring my kid?
Tried to, I couldn't get away.
Okay.
These guys usually meet, but these guys are there Monday through Thursday, 9 to 6 every week. My wife would be delighted to see you show up. She can't wait to get that thing out. I've been putting up with guys in my basement for almost 20 years.
This is extraordinary. So thank you for your presentation, and we're very excited about it. It's just, I've seen it, and it's an amazing model train. So we look forward to working with you. So, and I knew they would like it. So that's good.
One more thing I'll tell you. I called Mike when we first met, Mayor Ross and some of the staff, and they said to me, well, matter of fact, you know Mike Sarwin? I said, I don't. He said, he's your city manager in Medina.
Blocks away.
I called Mike and he said, oh yeah, he said, I've heard about this, but I didn't know where it was. He said, matter of fact, my dad was a model railroad. So it brings out the best in people.
Yeah, I showed my father the King 5 video of it. He's not terribly mobile at 87, but he thought that was just amazing. And I still can't believe I drove by your front door every day for 8 years, and I knew this was somewhere in Medina, but I had no idea where it was.
Right. Thank you for your time. We're gonna have to move on to the rest of our agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation.
Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
All right. So at this time, we will provide time for residents to comment on items not on the agenda. A few ground rules. Snoqualmie residents who are not present have a right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient, orderly manner. The time limit will be 3 minutes each. Please state your name and city of residence for the record, and direct comments to council as a whole and not to individual members. And also that public comment shall not include anything regarding the mill site PCI plan, which is a closed record. So anyone that wishes to make public comment, please raise your hand. Rami? Yes.
Rami Kutsal, 215 20th Avenue, East Seattle. Can I talk about the Railroad Museum? It is really interesting and really exciting. This may bring more people here than the actual railroad, because all the accountants who are retired right now, they would go all around to visit model trains, museums. And if the city decides to go with this, and I will do the engineering review pro bono.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
Well, can we get that in writing, like now?
It's on record.
It's on the record. Sign here.
Actually, I have been working on this project when it was Rotary Club, and then later on it became Gateway Park, and then we have been doing that work pro bono as well. So we finish it as pro bono, and I have all the records of the existing project.
Wow. Wow.
Excellent. Thank you.
Can we clap for that? We can clap for that.
We have a banker
Civil.
Hey, Rob, don't be pointing at me. I'm only a pseudo banker.
Anyone else?
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else raise their hand or online. So now we move to the consent agenda. Contains approval of the city council meeting minutes, roundtable meeting dated August 22nd, 2022, regular meeting dated August 22nd, 2022, special meeting dated August 23rd, 2022, claims report dated August 30th, 2022, AB 22-104, Conservation Futures Interlocal Agreement with King County, AB 22-116, South Correctional Entity, SCORE, Interlocal Housing Agreement, AB 22-118, Allocation Agreement, Memorandum of Understanding and Participation Form approving distribution of settlement funds to local governments from Washington Attorney General opioid litigation. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It was a second? It was moved by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew, second by Councilmember Watton. Any public comment regarding these items? Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Council, is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
Just briefly say, council members, I'm thrilled to see these items on the consent agenda. We have such a heavy workload between now and year end. I certainly find that I've been working with all of you long enough. I trust you. When I have questions, I reach out to committee members and find that my questions get answered. We can always go back and look. I would just encourage us, please, let's get as much on consent as we can. It'll really help us move things more quickly, and I'll stop talking to stop us from moving more quickly.
Excellent. Councilor Benson?
Yeah, can I ask a quick question about that? Sometimes I'm worried about the dollar figure associated with an item. That seems like a great plan when we have it in, Parks and Public Works or whatever. But I'm afraid to put it on the consent agenda because it's a big figure and seems like it should be in front of everybody. You have thoughts on that?
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
Yeah, my own thought is, remember, any one of us can pull anything off of the consent agenda if we have a question. So I think we needn't worry about that. I would say my own view is, I don't worry about the dollar amount. I worry about the controversialness of an item. So if this is something that you feel pretty confident, regardless of the dollar amount, I mean, Parks and Public Works, for example, handles much larger dollar amounts than, say, generally community development does. But yet we take up community development stuff and a lot of Parks and Public Works stuff. I think we can rely on the committee. So I don't use a dollar. My own view is I don't use a dollar limit at all. More a sense of, is this controversial? Sometimes in the past, council members have said, well, maybe this is a good story to tell. I've never quite understood that, but I would say, you know what, we have a fantastic department that does a communications department that can tell a story. We don't need to take council time for that. So I'd encourage us, let's take our time for things that we need to debate and kind of work out amongst each other. But if it's non-controversial, please, let's just get it on consent.
Councilor Lissay?
Yeah, I just want to also just in terms of the consent agenda, being on consent doesn't limit asking questions. And in fact, that's one of the misconceptions in the past has been, well, it's on consent, we can't talk about it. That's absolutely not the case. All the consent does is allow us to approve them as a group. And so if you have questions, regardless of whatever it is, you can still ask them of each agenda bill item and get those answered. But I too would encourage you to talk to the committee chair, talk to staff, get those questions answered ahead of time. That's usually the method I go about to.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? This motion passes unanimously. Consent agenda is approved. So now we move to committee report, F&A. Do you have any committee report?
Can you scroll down the,
There's-
no report.
Okay. Public safety.
No
Any
report.
Okay. We get rid of community development. Community development, any report?
Yeah, just one quick reminder of our short course on local planning that will be on Monday, September 19th, from 6 to 8:20. There is a Zoom link. It was sent out by our city administrator, Sourwine, so you can find that in your email. You do have to register in order to get the Zoom link, and this will go over a lot of the rules and powers of planning that we have, and we are coming up to a time when we'll be reviewing the comprehensive plan and updating it. So it'd be really good for all of us to know exactly what our duties are and responsibilities there. There's also the open government laws presentation. So if anyone is still in need of getting that completed, which I believe we're all required to do, including the commissions and commissioners, that you could do that as well at that meeting. We are going to do that as a joint meeting of the Community Development Committee, the Planning Commission, and the Economic Development Commission, but also the rest of the council is invited as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and no further report.
And what?
No further report.
Oh, okay. Okay, next, the committee report from Parks and Public Works Committee. We have AB 22-115, awarding an engineering contract to Parametrics for the 384th Avenue Southeast sewer replacement.
Okay.
Councilor Holloway, would you please read the summary and motion?
The agenda bill seeks approval to select Parametrics for the 384th Avenue Southeast Sewer Replacement Corridor Redesign Project and authorize the mayor to sign the service agreement. City sent request for qualifications. Well, I'm not going to read the rest of the summary just for brevity tonight and get into this a little bit. Move to adopt resolution 1622, awarding an engineering contract with Parametrics Incorporated for 384th Avenue Sewer Main Replacement Project and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Second.
It's moved by Councilor Holloway. Was it second by Councilor Watton to approve this, the motion?
Yep.
Councilor Holloway.
All right, so I partially agree with some of the conversation we just had, particularly in the case of these points in the next three. These are pretty complicated things, and I did want to bring to council some boil down of that, of what our considerations ought to be. So in regards to agenda, and I'm going to go fast because I'm trying to get us out of here. In regards to Agenda Bill 115, this will be replacing 2,100 feet of 10-inch gravity pipe with 12 inches along 384th between Newton and Kimball Creek. This is for increased service capacity. Budget required is some $480,000, 90,000 of that being in sidewalk, and 390 of that is within utility funding. So this is was not currently part of our 2021-22 plan, but project acceleration is to maintain lead time ahead of Snoqualmie tribe service growth, now expected in 2025 thereabouts. Project alignment is in alignment with service agreements with the tribe, our CAP plan, and the sewer systems plan. So we got the bases covered there. Now, this is not currently in our 2021-22 biennial or projects, but due to performance in other projects within the biennial, the expenses can be covered within the current biennial budget allocation. Okay, that's the period. Don't necessarily need to go deeper in that, but just for information. Current sidewalk program biennial budget is $764,300. Year-end estimate right now, we expect to spend about $661,000. That's going to leave us with about $103,000. That'll cover the $90,000 for the sidewalk portion of this.
This is just design only.
Yes, this is design only. Sorry, I read too fast up above. And the other offset is proposed to come out of the water reclamation facility phase 3 at this stage. The biennial budget was $4.2 million. We are expected to expend something less than $3.8 million. I don't have exact figures on that, but the underrun there is about $390,000, and that will cover the rest of this project. So within the existing biennial, accelerating to meet our commitment to the tribe and other things, and we've got funding which will shuffle around to cover it within the existing appropriation.
So we need to take public comment first. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item on the agenda? Mr. Shield? You have 2 minutes. Yeah, there you go.
Richard Shield, City of Snoqualmie. Just a quick, well, I guess it would be a question, but I don't ask questions, so just find out to think about. Of the reshufflings, I didn't follow enough to make sure that something doesn't get shuffled out to where it'll be a future expense that then wasn't planned for in the budget. I didn't follow enough of the shuffle. So just reminder to think about that.
Thank you. Councilor Benson?
Yeah, that's a really great comment. When asked that question the other day, or a similar question, Mike Chambliss explained that by reordering some projects that they have going on, there will be a significant savings by stacking projects on top of each other as far as the logistics of it, but that it wasn't going to push things out that needed doing ahead of time. I think there was a project that we weren't going to be able to get to regardless that's going to allow us to fund this.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew?
So I really appreciate the overview. By the way, I would just make the observation that we would expect that all of our projects come in under budget because we budget contingencies. So those are there so that we have the money if it's needed, but generally it won't be, and therefore they should come in under budget. Good. This discipline of explaining how a project that's going to get brought forward is going to be paid for within the existing budget, the existing budget is appropriation. I knew I could think of the word, the existing appropriation. I think that's terribly important. And so I'm really pleased to hear that briefing. Thank you very much. I would have asked on this particular one, had it been on consent, I would have pulled it off to ask those questions. So thank you for the briefing. Makes sense. And thanks for the great work by your committee.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Motion passes. And the agenda bill 22-115, awarding an engineering contract to Parametrics for the 384th Avenue is approved. Moving on to Parks and Public Works, AB 125, Sandy Cove Park Bank Protection and Restoration Phase 2, rescoping. Councilmember Holloway, would you please read the summary and motion?
Summary, the preliminary design and permitting budget for the Riverbank Stabilization Project is nearly expended. This agenda bill provides for the final design and bid support of the project. Go down to the motion. Move to approve the amendment with Northwest Hydraulic Consultants Task Order 38, Sandy Cove Design Phase 2, and authorize the mayor to sign. May I have a second?
Seconded.
Moved by Councilmember Holloway and second by Councilor Benson to approve the agenda bill 22-125. We will move to public comment. Does anyone have public comment on this item? Seeing no one in the chambers or online. Councilmember Holloway.
All right. Again, as stated, this is just a rescoping of the contract to include final design work and support for bid process. Preliminary design and permitting for the Riverbank Stabilization Project is nearly expended. You've already seen that. All right. Budget requires $487,000 and change. At this stage, the current riparian restoration project has a biennial budget of $2.2 million and has no expenditures. So short answer, due to the performance of other projects in the existing budget, this can be covered under the existing appropriation for this biennial. And get in grosser detail if you want. I got it written.
Yes, I have Mr. Hamlin online if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, any further discussion, Council? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion passes to approve the amendment to the Northwest Hydraulic Consultants Task Order 38 for the Sandy Cove Design Phase 2. Moving on to Agenda Bill 22-126, Amendment 4, with Aspect Consulting for water rates permitting support and geotechnical monitoring. Councilor Holloway, it's your turn again.
Let me catch up with this. See the Jim Bill up there. City received a grant of $477,400 from Washington Department of Ecology to explore the potential for aquifer storage and recovery as a means to obtain increased water rights for drought tolerance, resilience, and consumption. ASR may also help to improve summer flows in the Snoqualmie River and offset increased pressure on the aquifer supply from downstream users. This amendment provides for a feasibility study to evaluate the potential use of ASR as a water management strategy for the city. You can go on down and move to the motion. Keep going, keep going. Oh, proposed action there. Move to approve amendment number 4 with Aspect Consulted LLC for water rights support and geotechnical monitoring services. May I have a second?
Second.
Seconded.
Moved by Councilor Holloway, seconded by Councilor Johnson for amendment number 4 with Aspect Consulting. Is there any public comment regarding this item? Not seeing one in the chambers or online. Councilor Holloway.
All right, real short on this. Budget required is $674,400. You saw we got a grant for $47,000 from Department of
$177,000.
$477,400. The current project biennial budget is $1.3 million, rounded up. Expected expenditures to date and outstanding expenses are about $84,000. So there is plenty of budget within the existing biennial budget for this project for it to proceed.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
Yes, so I have 2 questions regarding this. First off, is this fully paid for by grants or other external sources, or is there city resources going into this? And if so, what's the breakout? And then the second question is, to the extent that this is being paid for by grants from the state, is the state agreement signed yet? Or would we be advancing money against a grant that is not yet signed?
So I can answer the first part. For this particular action, the budget required is $674,400. We have a grant to support this portion from Department of Ecology for $477,000 and $400.
Like 190 something that we.
Yeah, it'll be 190, but we've already budgeted for this particular project at $1.2 million. So we've got the funds to cover the 190 that we need out of the city. Now, has the grant been approved and agreed to?
Not yet. That will be coming back to the council.
Okay.
We are waiting on the agency.
Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew.
Move to restrict that no spending on this project that is going to be reimbursed by the state continue until the state contract is first signed.
Second.
Well, would the Pro Tem allow modification that project not to proceed until grant is approved?
I meant to say
Same?
that,
Same? So, okay, so there's motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew and second by Councilor Lissay to not spending money until the grant is approved.
Not to spend any money that would be reimbursed by the state until that's
Does-
approved. So there is a portion we're spending, fine, let's go ahead.
190K.
Yeah, go ahead. But let's not spend,
Reimbursed by the state.
Reimbursed by the state.
Okay.
there's some history of us getting a little ahead of ourselves out in front of the skis and then actually holding a big giant receivable from the state that then we get into problems actually getting to a final contract. So I don't want us to be exposed like that again. So that's all I'm trying to protect for here.
I think Bob's twitching.
Councilor Benson?
Yeah, I was wondering what Bob was thinking.
I think the Mayor Pro Tem just clarified. Mr. Hamlin could speak to this in more detail. I believe there is anticipated staff and consultant work to finalize the grant, and that would be paid for by these funds. Councilmember Holloway just mentioned there are appropriated funds already, but that work wouldn't proceed on the reimbursable tasks until the contract's in place, because the agency isn't going to issue the notice to proceed until that point.
That's correct. Clarifying question, just to be clear.
Pro Tem Mayhew?
Just to be clear then, with the proposal that I'm making, there's still room, we can proceed with what we need to do to get to a state contract. This wouldn't interfere with that. It would just serve the intent, which is let's not spend their money till we're signed on a contract.
Believe the answer to that is yes.
Have Mr. Hamlin on.
All right, and I will defer to Mr. Hamlin.
Mr. Hamlin, can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. We have actually worked through the agreement with the state. We've negotiated all of the various scope aspects, and we are waiting for signatures. From what I understand, there's an extensive signing process the state has to go through. So they're collecting signatures now, and we should get word on that any day.
Pro Tem Mayhew, thank you.
Yes, so I'm aware of the extensive signing process, and I just want to be sure that it's signed before we spend against that state money. But spending our portion, great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so let's read back the motion. Any other discussion on this particular motion? Okay, read back the motion, please.
Move to restrict spending on this project until grant money that will be reimbursed by the state is approved.
To clarify, to restrict spending of the portion of this grant that will be reimbursed by the state until the contract with the state is signed.
Spending of the restrict spending of the portion of the
This project.
Until grant money that will be reimbursed by the state is approved?
Till the contract for reimbursement with the state is signed.
Can we simplify? Yeah, no project activities that are to be funded by grant are to commence until grant is approved.
Signed.
Signed. Well, approved, signed,
Se-
okay.
no, it's
I'm
two
happy with
different
signed,
things.
go
Yeah.
for it.
Second.
Well,
That replaces the original DICER, just for clarification.
okay, repeat it out loud. What was it?
Well, then Brian started talking and then signed.
I shouldn't do
I
that.
still don't think I have it correct. Move to restrict spending.
Yours.
Portion of the project.
Spending of the portion of the project that is covered by the grant?
It's funded by the grant.
The project
Reimbursable.
That is funded by the grant.
Is not to execute until grant is signed and received.
Money. And until this
This is
this
why we gotta
contract
shut
is
up.
signed.
That's where I say we'll do adjourn.
They can listen to it later. Okay, any other discussion on that? Not? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Okay, so that portion passes. Then we go back to the original motion, which is to move to approve Amendment 4 with Aspect Consultants LLC for water rights support and geotechnical monitoring services.
Aye.
As so modified, right?
As so modified. With that.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, so that motion passes with the, as modified. All right.
No further report for Parks and Public Works.
All right, thank you. So I'll do a brief mayor's report. So last week was the groundbreaking ceremony for I-90 interchange improvements. So WashDOT will be building the diverging diamond interchange and add 2 lanes on State Route 18 between the interchange and Deep Creek. Completion is slated for 2025. So this is huge. It's 188 million, so they will be starting shows tentatively in November. And tomorrow we have a special workshop to continue Millsite PCI plan deliberations and development agreement deliberations starting at 6 p.m. And don't forget about September 22nd, Councilor Watton and Snow Valley Chamber Kelly Coughlin will be hosting the Snoqualmie Valley Housing Summit, and is to get a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges in addressing housing affordability. We also have a special workshop, budget workshop 27th, and we have a SVGA meeting, which I'm actually president of SVGA this year. on September 28th, and we're going to have a discussion about increasing crime in the Snoqualmie Valley and what types of legislation would help reduce overall crime. And we have legislators there to be part of the discussion. And we have, hopefully you will get a chance to meet her. We have a new behavioral health specialist that started about 2 weeks ago. Her name is Stephanie Butler, and she will be working with our police and fire departments as a first responder in situations that may require her help in rendering assistance. So, and also a final parting note would be, we ask for patience during this time as we continue to not have a city clerk. So, but our acting ones are fabulous.
Amazing.
I know they would like to do other things than what they're doing right now. So I'm going to pass it on to, so we have commission and committee liaison reports, and we'll do department reports. Any committee liaison reports? Okay, I'll turn over to Mike Sarwine for city administrator department reports.
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. I will attempt to be concise and succinct. First of all, our small but mighty communications division continues to expand our social media presence and our website, and they get great publicity for all of the city events. Our community development department, tonight I just want to highlight a couple of things. Their work on the Economic Development Commission, the Arts Commission. They had another, I really enjoyed the finally Friday Art and Wine Walk. Look forward to having more wineries for the wine walk, and the Snoqualmie Days selfie window murals that they did. And Nicole left, but I'll embarrass her anyway. As our community liaison and outreach engagement person, she's done a lot of work with the Downtown Merchants Associations, the Snow Valley Chamber of Commerce, and also the blood drives throughout the city. And our finance department, you get to witness the fruits of their labors on a regular basis with the budget book you received tonight, and also their work on the finance policies and the capital improvement plan. The fire department, as always, provides you with statistics-heavy report for geeks like me that I really enjoy. Just to highlight tonight, the amount of work that they put into training. The month of July, they spent almost 300 hours training firefighters, and in the month of August, almost 350 hours of training. These guys really put in a ton of work being ready to protect our community. We appreciate all that they do. Our IT department continues to make great progress on dealing with service desk requests and dealing with backlogs of tickets, hardware procurement, and also things like cybersecurity and security cameras. And our Public Works and Parks Department, one of the things that I think is the kind of the unsung heroes is all of the Parks and Public Works folks who work on things like the Boeing Classic and Snoqualmie Days. It is amazing how much work that they do that goes into making those events go as seamless as they do, and we really appreciate it. And finally, our police department, again, I like the statistics-heavy reports they provide. And as the mayor noted, behavioral health specialist started on September 6th. So thank you very much to all of our departments and all the hard work that they do.
Okay, so the next meeting of the City Council is September 26, 2022. There being no further, further business to come for the council, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Third.
Moved by Councilmember Holloway and second by Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion passes, and it is 9:41 p.m. We are adjourned.
Yeah, that's quicker than I thought.
We're back tomorrow.